What was a scam that someone tried to cheat the system with at your job? At my McDonald's, this guy came with his 2 young kids and got Happy Meals, and then called me over and said, "This cheeseburger has no meat," and demanded that he get another cheeseburger, and then one of his kids said, "Dad, you just ate it," referring to the meat in the cheeseburger. "Congratulations, sir, you just played yourself." This happened to me, but it was in a double deluxe burger. My mum went up to the counter with my burger and was like, you forgot the meat." Worked at Office Depot. The rewards program used to give a percentage of purchases back to the customer in the form of a gift card every quarter. One cashier at Office Depot decided to sign up for the rewards program under her name and scan customers' purchases throughout the day under her own account. She ended up accruing thousands of dollars in rewards in one quarter. This is with 1% back on most purchases. It was more than any other customer in the southeast region of the US. Needless to say, it wasn't very difficult for management to realize what had happened. Shortly after that incident, Office Depot switched up the rewards program so this couldn't happen again. Happened to a coworker. They shipped a guitar to a customer once, and the customer called in saying he'd never received it, demanding a replacement to be sent immediately or else he'd sue. Tracking the info, it said it was delivered and signed for, but delivery theft is still pretty common. On a whim, though, my coworker looked him up on Facebook only to find him holding the guitar in his profile picture with the caption, "My new guitar just arrived." Management sent him a screenshot of that, and he was never heard from again. A delightfully drunk man insisting that the mop he was carrying away was his. "You brought that with you on a winery tour?" "Yes." "I've developed wonderful skills in dealing with les inebriates." I gently and firmly reclaimed the much-beloved mop and sent him on his way. We used to have free food for happy hour. Just some deep-fried Cisco crap like chicken tenders or jalapeno poppers. So many people would come in, order a water, load up on the free apps and leave. We'd stagger bringing them out, one tray at a time for the whole happy hour. It was always the people who weren't paying for any drinks at all who had the stones to get upset and get free stuff when the apps weren't coming out in a timely manner. I used to work as a hostess at a popular wing place. Once we had a family come through, and when it was time to pay, they handed their server a Denny's coupon. The server was like, "This is for Denny's, not for here." And the customer said, "Oh, I just thought I'd try it anyways, you never know." Well, at least it sounds like they weren't unpleasant about it. Also, if you're going to do that, you can at least try and cover by saying, "Oh, I must have left the other one on the kitchen counter or something." Still, I appreciate how front up they were about it. They wanted nachos, but the queso was $2 cheaper, so they tried to order queso with the meat on the side, explaining this reasoning to the server with straight faces. They threw a fit when the server and then the manager explained that the queso was already mixed in one big pot and we weren't going to pick out the solid bits for one order, especially since it's not like it would make a difference in how it tasted. Naturally, they complained about all the food they ate. They didn't end up ordering queso or nachos, apparently that was a deal breaker. But my manager had a, "If you cleaned your plate, you obviously liked the food" policy, so they were ultimately unsuccessful in getting the refund they so clearly were gunning for. I scanned a shirt without looking carefully and it rang up at $16.99. The customer politely asked me to check the tag because it was marked $10. I apologized and took a look. The clearance sticker was placed in entirely the wrong place, leaving the regular price barcode completely exposed, so that's what the scanner picked up. I apologized again and explained that the tickets didn't match up, but we'd have someone run a confirmatory price check. That was the first item I'd scanned, so I was extra vigilant with all his other items, all of which had improperly placed clearance tickets. They were all men's big and tall sizes, but at least one of the clearance tags was clearly from a junior miss. Some of the items were already clearanced, but with a replaced tag for just $2 or $3 difference. I would have caught it eventually, but pointing out the scanning error is what tipped me off. Throughout the whole thing, the guy was unfailingly polite, so I kept thanking him for his patience while we ran price checks. He still bought $50 worth of stuff. Another favorite was when one of our known shoplifters, the kind who does it as a criminal enterprise, turned in a job application. We had her on camera stealing handbags earlier that same day. My favorite in my McDonald's restaurant are the people who don't realize our soda fountain is behind the counter and they ask for a cup of water. So we get them a cup of water and hand it to them. They realize they can't fill it with the soda they wanted, and then they go ahead and order a soda anyway. Best caught in the act moment ever. In retail, people cutting out a UPC for a cheap item and taping it or gluing it to a more expensive one. I mean, if you're gonna do that, don't use the UPC for a $50 item on a lawnmower. When someone tries to return an item after wearing it and there's a giant stain that they couldn't get rid of, To piggyback off this, I get customers all the time complaining about deodorant marks on clothing to try and get a discount on it. When we wipe it right off in front of them, they're always a little upset. Then I sometimes get customers who get their own makeup on a garment and try to get a discount. Former fancy pants hotel worker here. We have a strict no smoking in the hotel policy because A, it's city law, and B, old historic buildings. But foremost, the city law dictates that if you allow smoking in your business, the air quality has to meet this impossible standard. I'm not sure what the standard is exactly, but you can look up Mike Ditka's restaurateur and the smoking ban for details. Anyhow, even with a $300 fine detailed at check-in and also in-room, people would still try to smoke in the rooms and get away with it. If they didn't leave evidence, we couldn't charge them, but oddly enough, nobody was ever that smart. On one occasion, the room was rank with smoke, and the housekeeper found a pop can loaded with cigarette butts. We usually photograph, tag, and inventory these items because people would tend to dispute the charges. So when presented with the evidence, this one lady tells us she was smoking outside the building, ashing into her hand, and then carrying her ashes up into her room on the 14th floor and depositing all of the ashes into the tiny hole of the pop can. She unsuccessfully disputed her charges. FYI, the $300 charge is in place because we can't sell the room until the air quality is that of a room where someone wasn't smoking. With a good ozone machine, that might take a day or two. I think a super popular one that most people are probably familiar with would be, "Let me talk to your manager." This is especially common when you're simply doing your job as instructed, following rules and policies, and then you tell the customer something they don't want to hear. "My ticket says it expires on January 1st, 2014. Can I still use that today?" "No, ma'am, I'm afraid not. Since the ticket is expired, you won't be able to use it. You'll need to buy a new one." "What? Nobody ever told me I couldn't use the ticket just because it expired. This is ridiculous. You're trying to steal my money. Let me talk to your manager right now. They're going to let me use this ticket or I'll sue you." Oh yeah, on that subject, threatening a lawsuit is another popular one that people try all day long. Had a lady call our Pizza Hut claiming that we gave her hard undercooked wings that sent her daughter to the hospital and she wanted us to pay her medical bills. However, none of the 5 or 6 phone numbers she provided showed any orders for wings or anything else in our system or the nearest few stores. I don't know if she just expected us to give her thousands of dollars on hearsay. Working at the pool, I've had more than one person use, "Man, it's called free swim for a reason. It's actually called recreation swim, so, go pay." One day I was working with my dad and a customer told him he'd call his manager and get him fired because he's a good friend of his. My dad owns the store. He laughed and told him to never come back again. Another time, some guy tried to steal a banjo by putting it under his jacket. Unluckily for him, I was taking a break and looking at the cameras and I caught him. I went to confront him. He took the banjo and started rubbing it with his jacket, saying he was cleaning it, not stealing. To be fair, that's not a situation that any good improviser could easily explain away in that scenario. I think if there were an improv scene about a man trying to steal a banjo, there's a fairly good chance they'd come up with exactly this excuse in the scene. This was internal. I served at Red Robin for a while, and you could sign up for these cards called royalty cards, where every 10th burger is free. A couple of servers at my restaurant got themselves all fired at the same time for trying to game the system. They'd swipe the card for any table that didn't have one, and then apply the 10th burger to a table that paid in cash, so they could pocket the extra $10 or so. Red Robin monitors how often the cards are used. They were caught within 2 days. They'll argue with me about the size of a free birthday scoop, which, it says it right there. One of my old jobs had an online order system with a special instructions box. You wouldn't believe how many times people typed in, "add bacon" or "double meat, extra cheese," expecting to get these things for free. They were always angry if you added these things to their ticket, and then they'd be like, "Well, I don't want those things if they cost extra." They'd always expect me to give them their already made sandwich with the extras, and nope, I remade them every time. I once saw a woman at a Longhorn's chain steakhouse walk out with an entire bowl of those small packaged mints. The hostess was in such shock, but by the time she walked out to say something, the woman was already driving off in her car. I used to work in a call center job. My job was to call customers' references. These are usually people that know the customer well enough, and we make sure the info we have on file is correct. 1 time out of 10, we'll get a mum or boyfriend or friend or aunt who'll put the customer on blast and tell us that they won't pay their bill. The customer will get cancelled. As per call center rules, we're not allowed to hang up on people or argue with them. The worst was when a customer would list 3 references, set up 3 Google Voice numbers, and then answer the phone on all 3 numbers and just attempt to change their voice to give themselves a reference. and I had to sit and listen to it the whole time. Ask them questions while they plug their nose and try to pass themselves off as a different person. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Worked at Starbucks for a while, had this one guy always try to scam free stuff. So to get a venti coffee, it's like $2 or $3? And the first thing in the morning, we don't have much cash in the drawers, maybe $50, seeing as it's the start of the day. So this guy comes in 5 a.m. or 5:30 and orders just a large coffee. But you see, he only has $100. Me being the nice, customer-friendly girl I am, I just offer to him for free, not realizing what was happening, and send him on his way. It's not his fault we don't have the change for him, right? Then he tries it again the next day. I mean, really? Are you so dumb that you wouldn't think I wouldn't notice it? This time I say, oh, let me get the manager so we can make change for you. Oh, now you suddenly have a $5 bill in your car. Sure, buddy. I work in a fairly high-end restaurant. Apparently, it's extremely common for people to pull a piece of their own hair out and put it in their food so they don't have to pay the bill. Back when I was in college and worked at 7-Eleven, the paper food stamps were still the norm. EBT wasn't around yet. We kept a stack of $1 food stamps in the register for making change on larger denominations, but any change less than $1 was given back in coins. We sold some small candies for 5 or 10 cents a piece, and people would come in over and over, buy a candy with a $1 stamp, get their change, leave the store, rinse and repeat until they had enough change to buy alcohol. Here in the UK, it's actually illegal to give cash change for food stamps for exactly this reason. Like yours, our food stamp system is not valid for purchases of alcohol or tobacco. My buddy works at the local Taco John's. Whenever someone pays with the exact change, he just cancels the order and pockets the cash. This is why a lot of fast food places have a little sign now that says if you don't get a receipt, your order's free. I used to work in medical billing. This one lady called to make an appointment and she had no proof of insurance. She insisted she had insurance and was unwilling to pay anything at her appointment. We said that if she had her insurance agent call up our office with her policy info and confirm that she was insured, we'd accept that. So she hangs up, then within minutes she calls us back from the same number, her cell phone, and pretends to be an insurance representative. My coworker got that one and said, "Excuse me, ma'am, are you calling from the patient's cell phone?" The lady hung up that phone very quickly, and we never heard from her again. People at grocery store self-checkout who scan something cheap but then put something way more expensive but the same weight into their bags. Bonus if you just ring up the wrong kind of vegetable. For example, my grocery store charges more for peeled onions than unpeeled of the same type, but they look exactly the same. Lots of greens look very similar. It would be very hard to catch unless the cashier was looking directly at you, and then it can be claimed as an honest mistake. I guess I have a story about the opposite that always blew my mind. My parents live out in the country, and there's a super tiny McDonald's on the highway closest to them. They went to grab a quick bite, and they were about 15 minutes from home at this location, so they ordered inside and ate inside as well. My mum ordered chicken nuggets, bit into one when she was sitting down and realized it was pretty cold. So she returned it, they gave her a freshly fried sixer, and she was happy. 5 to 10 minutes later, a lady came running inside yelling at the top of her lungs that someone had bit into one of her nuggets. Instead of checking Mum's used box of nugs, they just threw it in the next drive-thru bag. She still laughs her butt off about that. Oh man, we had a waiter keep used gift cards, and then when a family would try and pay with a gift card, he'd swap them so it looked like it didn't work, and the family would pay or get their meal comped, and he'd walk away with the gift cards. He then sold them on Craigslist or used them when people paid in cash and kept the money. My boss called the number on Craigslist who was selling our cards and asked who he was. He was fired the next day. I work in IT. Some guy wanted to get some free prints, so he asked for a refund on a bunch of pages, saying he didn't issue the print request. Aside from that being, not the greatest reason, since you had to log in to submit requests, we could literally track his iPhone via MAC address as he moved across campus connecting to our Wi-Fi spots. It just so happened that he had moved from his room to the printer location and back right before he made the request. I will say there was a moderate to good chance of this guy's plan working with a less attentive staff member, so good on you for being diligent. Worked at a movie theater and we had a guy who'd purchase an IMAX ticket and use his royalty card to get the points. Usually he'd purchase it at a kiosk, and I kid you not, he'd come asking for a refund less than 5 minutes after the purchase. How the loyalty system was set up was that the points would not be refunded, so he did this a few times just to get a free movie coupon. Pretty easy to catch it because we noticed the time the ticket was purchased after we refunded it. Sent it up the ladder to corporate, his loyalty account was cancelled and they changed the system to refund points as well. Former Starbucks employee here. Customer orders drink, barista makes drink, customer says it doesn't taste right, so we have to remake it, but they keep the first mistake drink as well and give it to a friend who just happened to not order anything. Finally, they now have a policy. To remake the drink, you have to also give up the first mistake drink. Also, ordering just espresso shots over ice and then filling up the rest with creamer at the craft bar. There's a special circle in hell for you people. I work in a book chain here in Ireland where we use the euro. A lot of our magazines come from the UK where they use pounds, so they'll have a price in pounds on the cover. I had one woman absolutely lose it at me when the price came up as €6 when the price on the cover said £4. She insisted on paying the pound price because she happened to have a £5 note on her, but asked to see my manager at 9 p.m. on a Saturday night when I told her we couldn't sell her the pound price because we add Irish taxes, cost of doing business, to that price. People are just the worst. I'm not really hungry. Can I order off the kids' menu? Sure, I'm in a good mood and I've had a good day so far. Why not? I drop off the check. Isn't the drink supposed to be included in the price of the kids' meal? The gym I work at has a check-in computer that none of us employees ever check. We know everyone by name and maybe every once in a while we check memberships. It's not our job, but the job of the manager who's completely absent. If someone needs to pay, a message pops up after check-in that they need to pay, but it gets deleted when the member hits enter. So, I checked this one guy on a random whim. He hadn't paid his membership in over a year. Next time he came in, he scanned his card and hit enter. I was standing behind him and said, "So, for a year you've been pretending to scan in and all the while you know you haven't paid your membership. Man, if things are so bad for you that you can't afford $30, I'll gift you a charity membership through our poverty program. Are you interested?" He said, "No, here's $30, I'll pay from now on." About 2 months later, he stopped coming in. What I hated was that he was a friend at that point. Yeah, some friend. Steal from where I work and then smile and hug me every time you come in? Liar. Creep. Get the frick out of my gym. I used to usher at baseball games and fans would buy cheap tickets off StubHub, then check our official site before the game on their smartphones. They'd pick the blue dots in the first few rows that hadn't sold yet and move up there to watch the game. Not bright since we had access to the same info as them. I work at Starbucks. Yes, I understand how overpriced it is. If I didn't work there, I'd never order it. Anyways, we had a regular who came in every day and was huge and was a very cheap person. If you bring your own cup, you get a 10-cent discount, and he always said, "Don't forget my discount." It's 10 cents, dude, whatever. He recently told one of my partners that his previous drink was made wrong and that a different partner, let's call her Julie, had said he could get a free one. Julie wasn't there at the time, so he went ahead and gave it to him. Came to find out that Julie had never said that and hadn't even talked to him. So about a week went by and one of my supervisors, let's call her Wendy, asked him about it and said, "Well, Julie's in a lot of trouble for this because she isn't authorized to give away free drinks without letting someone know." And he said, no, it was, he gave another name. And she said, "Oh, really? Because they're the one who was telling me this. So next time, make sure to try your drink before you leave so this doesn't keep happening." He was so nervous he dropped his lid twice and kept stuttering. Look, if you can't afford it, don't buy it. I only say that because he adds a million things to it and gets mad that we charge him for it. The worst was, I can barely taste any Crown, man, and they put the drink back on the bar like I'm going to top it up. You saw me pour the frickin' jigger. I'm not going to give you free booze, especially after the tip you just forgot to leave me. Family of 4 orders one entree for all 4 of them to share and keeps asking me for free bread baskets. Which, I'm not spending any more time on your cheap butt because 1, I know you won't tip me well, and 2, if you're that broke, why come to my restaurant when you could just get 30 items on the dollar menu at some fast food joint for the one dish you're buying here? I work as a barista and sometimes someone will come up to me and tell me that their drink was made wrong earlier and the manager told them they could come back for a free one later. But they never have a receipt and they can never remember which manager they spoke with. It's always super obvious that it's a scam and they always just leave when I offer to grab a manager. I love it when people try to get free stuff at hotels. I was traveling with this guy and he thinks he's a god. I got a free upgrade because I had status with the hotel. My companion did not and absolutely blew a gasket. He then stood there for like half an hour trying to get the free suite. Finally, a big group arrived and they blew him off. Same day next morning, he began negotiating again. Finally, they sold him an upgrade for like $15. The best part is that this was at a Fairfield Inn, so we're not talking about much of a difference. What things do guys do to impress girls that make them cringe? This might just be me, but talking about how much you work out. Sometimes it's not even subtle. In the middle of a conversation about Harold and Kumar, please don't shout, "And I can bench press like 130 pounds. I just thought you should know." Also, sending a friend over to talk to me for you. I thought that sort of thing would stop well after high school. I'm amazed how many guys my age still do this. Shyness can be sweet, but really? I'm not going to eat you. Also, please don't tell me that, for a girl, I'm actually really cool. Oh, and guys, I know that's not a lot of weight. That's just a random example. I have no idea if the last guy who said that actually said 130 pounds or not. I'm exaggerating. Sheesh. When I didn't have a 360, I played the Mass Effect series at the rec center at my school. In the heat of a battle in ME2, this bespectacled young man sits next to me and informs me that I'm using my sniper rifle wrong. It's okay though, because he's here to help. Actually, people have paid him for his video gaming advice before, so I'm lucky to get it for free. As if that weren't obnoxious enough though, he talked all the way through the cutscene where Legion joins your party. Constant sexual talk. I'm quite open to flirting, sexy talk sometimes, but it doesn't have to be a part of every single conversation. One time a guy was showing me some pictures he took on his phone. As he's scrolling, tons of nudes from other girls pop up in his camera roll. Like, WTF, dude. This is our first date. I don't want to see sketchy pictures like that. At least save them to another album. When they try to impress me with their knowledge without taking my own into consideration. For example, this guy recently tried hitting on me in a parking lot. He then started giving me bad car advice, and it was obvious that I knew more than him about mechanics. I'm a grad student. I've had guys try to explain my own research systems to me. My mathematical models in disease ecology. My next degree will be biology, but I have a math degree. I use a lot of differential equations and dynamical systems. A lot of guys I talk to about it see me as a big-eyed bio major who's intimidated by math and try to help me understand my own questions. Come to art school. We're almost proud of the fact that we have no idea what you're talking about. Yes, the cliché of academic young men trying to lecture women on systems that the women themselves created is actually a very common one, especially on Twitter. Do better, supposedly educated men. Immediately bragging or showing off within 5 minutes of conversation. That includes how much you make, your job, etc. One guy at a bar last week grabbed my arm to shout in my ear, "I had cancer when I was a kid." Yeah, don't do that. Tell me how many girls they've slept with. Most of the time they're lying, and if they aren't, then ooh. Eggplant pics. I'm 37, on OkCupid, and 2 days ago a guy tried to send me one a day after we'd exchanged phone numbers to arrange a date. He's in his late 30s or early 40s. Seriously, dude, we haven't even met. What the frick? When they bash on women, it literally makes no sense, but it's so common. Especially an ex. So tacky. No, I didn't ask about her. And no, I don't care how much of a loose woman you think some other girl is. If you bash other women, chances are you speak in a derogatory manner about me to your buddies. Discuss their muscles, their sexual prowess, how much they can drink before puking, how much they drank last night before they puked. But, the gun show. Does anyone know a plumber? 'Cause these pipes are about to burst. Start rejection flex. Want to see how many push-ups I can do? Sit on my back and hold my protein shake. I actually saw a guy do this and it worked. The girl loved it. The guy was me. I'd try this, but I don't think 0 is an impressive number. Trash talk my significant other as if that will make me change my mind and hop on your eggplant instead. I once had a guy ask me about my boyfriend. When I finished describing him and our relationship, he took a beat and then said, "He sounds like a great person. Why don't you dump him and go out with a 0? It didn't work, but I gave him points for making me laugh a little. Hey baby, have you ever hit rock bottom? He wore a shirt with 2 arrows pointing to his biceps that said, "Welcome to the gun show." Cringe and laugh. I have a shirt with 2 arrows pointing to my biceps that says, "Obama can't take these guns. How hard did your panties hit the floor?" Flaunting their wealth. I'm sure that's a turn-on for some girls, but for me and most people I know, it just screams D-bag. These are the same guys who whine about how all the women they date are gold diggers. No crap, dummy. To clarify, there are so many responses asking what I mean by flaunting. It's not douchey to have money or to spend money on nice things. It is douchey to brag about how much money you make and the nice things you own, to make a big show of spending your money so everyone can see how rich you are, or to act as though being wealthy somehow makes you better than those around you. I'm a college student, so when I see guys doing this, I assume 90% of the time it's their parents' money anyway, which makes it seem even more pathetic. I flaunt my Costco membership because it's my life's greatest achievement. Am I safe? I wouldn't date a guy for his money, but a Costco membership, I would genuinely consider it. I may have detracted a little from serious points, but in fairness, the banter going on underneath all of the posts is very self-effacing and good-natured. Crazy driving. Maybe once I've known you for a while and understand that you have total control of your car, I'll be more comfortable with you driving fast and reckless. But until then, showing me how you can drift around a corner just makes me think you're being reckless with my life. Please stop. The biggest one for me is lying about things he's into just because I said I was into those things. If you've never seen Blade Runner, for example, don't say you have seen it just because it's my favorite film. I can always tell when they're lying about this, and I don't think it's sweet. Another thing is demanding to pay for everything. I appreciate when guys pay, but I like to pay once in a while too. This isn't the 1950s, and I have a job, so let me treat sometimes. I want to clarify that I do appreciate being treated to drinks, dinner, etc. Who wouldn't? It's only when I offer to pay and my date refuses to allow this when I cringe. I don't think this behavior is super common, but I have experienced it with at least 2 separate guys. Just my preference, and it makes me feel good to be able to treat my date sometimes. I once went on a second date with a guy who came to pick me up. I live in apartments and try to be super considerate of my neighbors all the time. As soon as I get in his car, he starts revving his engine super loud. A, I am not impressed by that whatsoever, and B, I'm sure none of my neighbors appreciated the noise either. This was our last date. This goes right along with speaker systems in a car. Please don't blow my eardrums out listening to your crappy music on my first date. When they say, I could be with any girl right now, but I chose you. God bless you. Oh my God, so blessed. When guys give me a resume or tell me why I should date them. I'm real buff, I'll treat you real nice, I'll make lots of money, and I'll buy you gifts. Like I'm some sort of shallow, brainless twit that is looking to hire a boyfriend. I dropped my monster condom for my magnum dong. I don't like loud, obnoxious guys. Sure, if I were at a bar and you're drunk and yelling, that's one thing, but to just be loud and obnoxious at all times embarrasses me. If we're getting coffee, the people at the other end of the patio shouldn't know what we're talking about. Went out with a dude I got set up with. He seemed okay, albeit not my type. But I'm like, whatever, we'll eat and have an alright time. Nope. We get to the restaurant and as soon as our Latina waitress leaves, he starts spewing all this garbage about Mexicans, saying they're lazy and that he wanted a new server. Awful. I looked at him and went, Lamento que te sientas así, and broke out of there. Translated, I'm sorry you feel that way. In conclusion, racism does not make me wet. Racism, not good. Okay, I'm gonna need more notes. Physical assault on the first date, yes or no? Holy crap, I'm so happy I don't do any of these things. 0 out of 0 is still undefeated. Equating their worth or validity as a human being with their car in any way whatsoever. Its make, its model, its size, etc. I once had someone introduce themselves to me as, I'm so-and-so, and I drive a Lamborghini. He was bright, intelligent, charming, and successful, and didn't have a clue about himself. If a guy is trying to impress me, I'm probably too busy being impressed that they're making the effort. Having said that, the last guy to chat me up kept bringing up the fact that he's read all of the Game of Thrones books, and so he's never surprised by the TV show. I failed to see why this was such a huge point of pride, but I guess literacy is never a bad thing. Well, there's our very low benchmark for the evening, gentlemen. Basic literacy. I once had a guy tell me way too many giraffe jokes, but I forgave him because he was hot. I try and avoid giraffe jokes, not just on dates either, because I'm always worried the joke will be way over someone's head, and then I would feel bad. You son of a B-word. 1. For some reason, at the university I go to, it's a really big thing for guys to brag about how broke they are. This is almost always at the bars when they're spending copious amounts of money on drinks. Oh man, I'm so broke. I have like no money, and that's why I'm drinking Hams all night. It's not impressive, and coming from a low-income background, it tees me off. No, you're not broke, and if you are, it's only because you're walking around in expensive clothes and going to bars every night. People who are actually dirt poor do not brag about it. Why is this a thing to brag about? 2. Trying to act like they know more about a subject than they really do. People know when you're bullcrapping. I respect people for more humbly saying, "I don't really know very much about that, so I can't comment." In the same vein, acting like there's no possible way I could know more about math or science or politics than them because of my chest and hoo-ha. 3. Wow, girls who look like you aren't usually this smart. Good for you. Why would you want to worry your pretty little head with grad school? Negging is not a good strategy for picking up quality women. Move on to the fall-over drunk ones who are barely coherent enough to notice how awful you are if you want to continue these actions. Pictures of your junk. You're gross. Thank you. Unless I ask for one, I don't want your junk in my inbox. I think some men love their eggplants and want to show it off as if we give a crap. I love my member, but I love pooping too, and nobody sends vines of that. The whole, "but I'm a nice guy" act. If you were really a nice guy, you wouldn't have to tell that. There was this guy at my college for a semester that would lift his shirt and show girls his third nipple. We all thought he had Asperger's, so it was really painful to watch. Was his name Andrew? My friend likes to do that at the bar, and the guy with the glass eye always one-ups him and takes his eye out. I seriously want to hang out at this bar. Constantly call me sexy, beautiful, etc. when we've just met. Example: "Hey, what's up? I think you're sexy as hell. We should hang out." It makes me feel like a piece of meat and it makes you look shallow. Follow me around the gym and strategically place yourself where I can see you lift. I'm busy, bro. Also, to the guy who found it necessary to do one-armed rows at the foot of my bench with 100-pound dumbbells, you drop it on my foot and I will end you. Not impressive, annoying as frick. Try to sound too intelligent in conversations or text by throwing an excess amount of uncommonly used words. Usually this happens discussing things I like, as if they're trying to one-up me on their knowledge of the topic or impress me with the fact that they like it too. Keyword here is excess. Large vocabularies are nice, genuine intelligence is obvious, but we can all spot those compensating, arrogant ones. Picking up a guitar during a party and playing Wonderwall. FYI, I'm not a girl, but I cringe when guys think that would actually impress a girl. Guys who say they're musicians or guitarists who oh so casually bring their guitars and play some annoying crap not very well. That drove me nuts in college and high school. I remember being really impressed when I started dating a guy who had never mentioned he was a guitarist until months in, and then when he played it, it wasn't to show off and he was also really good. I married that guy. When I'm at a party and a guitar comes out, it's no longer even up for debate whether this is cringe to do. In fact, for most of my friends and I, there's a very clear eye roll that goes around that room. As a woman of circa 30 with a big chest, I've seen a lot of these. Some of the things that guys think will impress me are truly bizarre, and I can only assume they're ideas they found in some Mars or Venus bullcrap and legitimized by women who act like impressionable idiots as part of their flirting strategy. General alpha behaviors. Yes, you may be stronger than me, but wrenching things out of my hands because "let man do the job," or telling me what I think or should think is not something that will get you under my skirt. Following up on that, aggression and hostility towards others, especially other men. You think I need protection? Okay, fine. You think you need to pound your chest and bare your teeth at every passing male? I'm out. Bad-mouthing other women. You may think that telling me about that one chick who was so ugly and fat will be hilarious, and will suggest to me that I'm not ugly and fat and we can laugh at her together, right? All it suggests is that you're an abrasive butthole. Also, sexism. Yes, there are men who think that dropping remarks like, "women should not be allowed to drive," will make me feel so awesome that despite their hatred for all that is female, they will stoop to interacting with me, or something, dunno. Bragging. If you're out doing cool stuff, I will want to hear about it. But cool stuff does not become cooler when you adopt a condescending, braggart tone. I have a friend who travels a lot, and he can always tell you what he saw and why he did think that particular spot was interesting. And he tells you how cool these places were, not how cool he is for having gone there. Whether you're skydiving or playing League of Legends, tell me how great that activity is, not how great you are. Speaking of negative behavior as if it were good, the fact that you got blackout drunk or do drugs or have beaten someone, have hurt someone, slept with a girl and never returned her calls, broken the law while driving, is not a good thing. Quit behaving as if it was a good thing. I can go on like this, but I think I'll stop. One-upping traditionally male interests. So, what did you get up to this weekend? Me. Nothing much, some video games, hanging out with my cat. What games do you play? RPGs mostly. I was playing Skyrim. RPGs are so lame, but I love gaming. I was playing COD with my buddies the other day, and it was sick. This is very annoying, but also just one-upping in general makes me angry. I went on a date with a guy who literally after I said anything, he stated how he was better, or that doesn't beat what happened to him type of thing. You think making me feel inferior is impressive, pal? It's not. At the end of the date, I said I'd say goodbye, but you probably do that better too. He laughed and asked when we could meet again. We never met again. Went on one date with a guy. He'd been an extra in some movie where he'd actually had a line addressed to the main character. Now, don't get me wrong, that's neat and we're seeing the movie after dinner for just that 15-second part. But the guy seriously couldn't talk about anything else unless it was how famous he is now or the autographs he thought he'd be signing after we watched it. He spent the entire meal talking about himself and this 2 days of his life. I only felt a little bad when we watched the movie and his scene had been cut. Tell me they're in the army or a marine, automatic turn-off. On the other hand, if they don't tell me and it comes up in conversation later, it's not a turn-off. I'm just used to the type that within 5 seconds of meeting them, you know what branch they are in and so on. Many in my comments are getting defensive and saying, "Oh, should I not tell you my profession then? It's my life, you're a B-word," etc. Remember, this thread is about what guys do to impress girls, so in that context is what I'm referring to. I can tell the difference if they're doing it to impress me or not. Don't worry. Hey girl, I've spent 4 years dodging bullets for your freedom. Navy radar operator. Milady? Ah, how fedorable. And now, just a quick intermission of comments from men reading the thread for advice. I solve all of these problems by not being able to talk to women in the first place. I'm perfect. Sounds like I just need to get over the whole approach anxiety and I should be set for a good time, judging from the stupid crap my competitors are pulling. Holy moly. Oh my god, the stories in this thread are making me sound amazing. Hello, ladies. Quick, guys, take down notes of everything not to do. I really hate it when the guy is spending a minute looking at his notepad in between every sentence he says. Walking up to a girl who is just relaxing and telling her to smile. Get the frick out of here. It's not cute or endearing. I don't really want to be with a man who's already correcting me and we aren't even acquaintances. Sod right off. Trying to be classy when it's time for adult fun times. It's just creepy. True story, my now husband and I were getting busy in the shower. He was giving me some finger action, and after checking out the goods, he blurted out, you're really starting to blossom." The muffin shop immediately closed its doors until further notice over that little chestnut. I really wasn't into screwing with my creepy uncle that night. Lately, the moron fest for me has been online dating. People with zero social skills. If I message someone, I damn well read their profile first. I try to find some common ground, ask profile-based questions. That seems like basic interaction 101. But so much, "You're really hot," one-liners. Boring. Or asking the random, pointless or ridiculous questions like, "What's your favorite color?" Well, that's a freaking essential starting point for a relationship, isn't it? If I say orange, we obviously can't go further. Or worse still, a really cringy attempt to be all random lols, questions about what we would do together in space with a unicorn and a cheese sandwich or something. Just no. WTF. Okay, this isn't that common, but I just have to throw it out there. What in the frick is up with guys lifting their shirts casually to show their stomachs, usually while licking their lips? I don't care if you have six-pack abs, that just makes you look stupid. Not to mention, it's usually done by guys that don't really have a great pack of abs. Just stop. Number 1. Negging. They assume that not only will it work, but that somehow I don't read books or use the internet enough to know why they're insulting me. It never makes you look good. It makes you look like a pretentious, misogynistic d-bag who gets dating advice from online forums, which assume women are inherently predictable and easy to target. Number 2. Telling me women who are as smart as me don't usually look like I do. Maybe women in graduate school aren't there as decorations. Number 3. Complaining about how crazy your ex or all of your exes were. Bad-mouthing your ex makes me think you have a poor choice in women and will also probably bad-mouth me when I'm not around. Maybe all of your exes are crazy, but the common denominator is you. Number 4. Continuously trying to make physical contact when I'm openly uncomfortable. I went out with a guy and we were supposed to meet a bunch of people for a law school dinner, and at the last minute he just asked me to go to dinner alone. Whatever, I went. All dinner long, he kept trying to get me to drink more, complained about his exes, and kept trying to play footsie with me until I was in a contorted position to avoid his feet. It was awful. Which reminds me, number 5. Do not pressure me to drink more. That's not only disrespectful, it comes off really creepy. What have you witnessed someone do that made you realize he or she is really, really smart? My wife's grandfather. He's a retired electrical engineer with a dozen patents to his name and a long list of recognitions I can't be bothered to remember or name. I always knew he was brilliant, but never realized just how, until one day last year when we were visiting and he got a phone call. Keep in mind, he's been retired for 20 years and is 86 years old. The phone call was from an electrical engineering firm from halfway across the globe, asking if they could fly him out to a site and have him consult on the energy capture of a hydroelectric dam they were building. They'd run into the problem that none of them, all electrical engineers, could solve. They had consulted 3 of the top-related university departments in the US on the issue, and the last one had referred them to him. 20 minutes on the phone and he agreed to think about it. 2 days later, he had solved their issue and written the solution on a single 8x11 sheet of paper, which he scanned and emailed to the company. He said he took so long to write it up because he didn't want to have to fly all the way there at his age. His explanation was so clear I was able to understand it and follow it with no relevant higher education. I spent a year trying to track down an intermittent issue on my car. An older gentleman on the forum had suggested a likely cause, but I disregarded it as the parts had been replaced. Sure enough, he was right, and I managed to follow from that to find the other half of the problem. I'd had a mechanic look at it, I'd spent hours tearing my hair out trying to fix it. Nothing worked prior to that. Respect your elders, folks. One time, my drunk uncle was in jail and needed bail money. And being that my dad was the only one in the family with any real savings, they all looked to him to fork up 100% of the cash. Having been asked, he realized this situation had 2 possible outcomes. 1, pay for his bail and never get the money back. 2, not pay for the bail and have the whole family blame him for it. So my dad decided to throw them a curveball. He told them that whatever the rest of the family raised for the bail, he'd not only match it, he'd offer double what they'd raised together. Nobody offered 1 cent. Blame averted. I'm quite amused by how funny everyone else has found this. I'm going to tell my dad about this later. He'll think it's hilarious too. Depending on how high the bail was, I do understand this, and what a great way to avoid sanctimonious judgment from the other family cheapskates. Sorry, drunk brother. Have a fun night in the clinker. My husband and I aren't sophisticated. At night we wind down by watching Family Guy, etc. Although it's worthy to note, he watches shows about how anything is made or done, etc. He drinks a beer at night after work and loves his old favourite shirt, this flannel with holes in it. Anyway, we're at my in-laws' place where everyone we're possibly connected to are there. A quiz show comes on, and it seems like a good idea to do trivia in partners. I say yes, knowing that we're up against professors, doctors, and hospital directors, and we're going down. Not only did my husband answer all the questions first and correct, he beat everyone. It all came to an end when he chugged his beer and burped really loud. My husband is successful in his field, especially with numbers and measurement types of things, but I never realized how much information he retains. I just kind of thought he was smart about the industry he worked in. My old roommate George is one of my best friends. He's one of the dumbest people I've ever met. We both ordered Chinese food one night and got the same thing, General Tso's chicken combo with pork fried rice and an egg roll. We both got Cokes, we were both walking back from the takeout place, getting a little giddy about eating our food back at our place. We sit at the table and he opens the bag. His face grows stern as his brow furrows. Which one is mine? What? Like, which meal? He continued as he looked up at me. Bro, we got the same food, whichever one you want. I know, but like, which one is mine? The conversation went on for about 5 more minutes before I just took my meal and we watched Adventure Time. Oh no, frick, I misread the title. I'm going to leave my post here anyway. Here's my other George story. George always tries to give something up for Lent because God is always watching. He told me once after he took a hit from his bowl. One year it was beer, another it was only skipping class once a week instead of 3 times. He lasted maybe 3 days on that one. One year he gave up KFC. We lived about a block away from a KFC/Taco Bell, which he frequented about as much as he got high. Anyway, no KFC for 40 days or God will smite him. Bro, I want to do it to prove myself, you know? So I gave up whiskey and vodka to make it a team effort. we're in it together type of deal. The next day I come home after class and see him laying on the couch like Kate Winslet in Titanic, with his shirt off, gouging into a box of fricking Popeye's fried chicken from a block the other direction. He saw how disappointed I was. "But I'm still good, dude. It's Popeyes, see?" he said, wiping the grease from his face with his sock. I had a teacher in high school that using both hands could write a sentence starting from the beginning and end simultaneously. He even split the middle word of the sentence. He also spoke around 5 languages. What the frick?
A witch! Obviously.
Older brother always was terrible at school. I remember him straight up asking why he needed to graduate high school and then again in college. He accepted a low-level job after graduation in marketing that ultimately fell apart due to the company executives screwing up big time. During all of it, he was somehow able to keep a small client, and within 7 months of working, was promoted to their executive marketing director, making 6 figures. Now he has multiple clients on the side and is always scheming something up. Dude is as hard-headed as they come, but nonetheless a darn marketing genius. Blows my mind how far he's come. I was once in Chinatown and I saw this old Chinese guy with a bunch of groceries. He had tied the bags together by the handle and slung them over his shoulder. He looked ridiculous. The next week, I was struggling with a lot of groceries and I remembered the old Chinese guy. Stopped on the sidewalk, tied all my bags together, and walked home like the unencumbered dork I became that day. When my friend, who is a prodigy at school and everything he does, chose to go to a music college to learn piano jazz, when he could have been a neurosurgeon or an astronaut. While I knew he was smart before, that made me realize that apart from being good at memorizing stuff, he could also realize that good grades don't mean you can be a doctor or a scientist. They mean you can do whatever you want, prestigious or not, and that he could see what would make him the happiest. In my book, he went from a smart student to one of the great minds I've ever talked to. Carpe diem, jazz genius, good for you. We should all aspire to do the career that makes us happy. There's even the old cliche about it meaning we never have to work a day in our lives. Which is debatable, by the way. Finally, something I can contribute to. Back in college, I had 3 roommates, an engineer major, pre-med, and pharmacy major. Let's call him Ray. Ray met his girlfriend freshman year, and they dated throughout undergrad and PharmD school. Our school had an intense pharmacy program, and we see students working and studying their butts off. Ray's girlfriend always set up these study groups and invited Ray. But Ray never attended and would lie to his girlfriend that he was studying on his own. The roommates and I know what's up. Ray was always in his room playing video games, watching TV, movies. The guy never talked about class, but he attended every session and lab. Every midterm he took, he aced, and that really teed off his girlfriend and pharmacy friends. The crowning moment that I knew this guy was a genius happened during sophomore year spring finals. I was up late studying, and Ray was on his computer playing Counter-Strike. He suddenly got up, went to his closet, pulled out one of his textbooks, took off the shrink wrap, and looked at a page, put the book back in the closet, and resumed playing Counter-Strike. I was like, dude, what the frick? He said he had a final in the morning and forgot a compound formula and had to look it up. I lived with this guy for another 2 years and he never studied, and textbooks were still shrink-wrapped up. Not a person, but my parents' old dog. My mum could get bones from the butcher shop for their dog. They were long enough that the dog couldn't get all the marrow out of the center. The dog figured out that only my stepdad's truck was heavy enough to break them after experimenting with the other vehicles at the house. There was usually a bone in the same spot in the driveway every time I went home. This reminds me of crows dropping nuts on crosswalks. Or the guy who created a machine that would dispense a peanut when a coin was put in and trained the crows to do so. The crows left and bought him a crap ton of loose change. I knew 2 guys in undergraduate who would play mental chess. As they'd passed in the hall, one of them would say, "Knight to Queen 3, or whatever. The other guy would roll back his eyes for a second and then nod to acknowledge the move. Both guys then kept walking in opposite directions. Later that day, when they passed again, the second guy would declare his counter-move. A game could last days, and they never forgot where any of their pieces were. Each had a mental image of the board. Sure, they might have been faking, but these guys were always first and second place on the dean's honor list for all 3 years of my undergraduate. I knew them pretty well. I think the mental chess was legit. Most really good players can do this. Once someone becomes familiar enough with the game, it becomes a lot easier to recognize the patterns. Of course, intelligence is required and advantageous to get good at chess. It's true. They did a study where they had master and up-level players look at chess positions that had been arrived at by an actual game for a few seconds, and then try and recreate the board from memory. They all did phenomenally well and for the most part could always recreate the board. Then they did the same thing with non-chess players and they weren't nearly as good. Then they did the same thing with randomly generated board positions that hadn't been arrived at by a game. The masters were still better at recreation, but the gap had significantly narrowed and they no longer recreated them with 100% accuracy. I was at my desk waiting to make a purchase over the phone, and I mentioned to a coworker that I always have to pull my credit card out. I should have this number memorized by now. Another coworker overheard that and said, "I know your Visa number," and spit it right out. After I got off the phone, I asked him, "What the frick?" He said he heard me say it a couple of weeks earlier. Numbers just stick with him that way. I always knew he was a very bright guy, but that took it up a notch.
I'd ask him very politely not to ruin your life.
I envy people with this sort of eidetic memory so much. I would never forget my many passwords again. Small ambitions, people. Sitting in a best friend's apartment on the East Coast in the mid-1980s. He's working on some code on a prototype Unix workstation that MIPS had given him. He runs his program and it produces an answer, then runs it again and produces a different answer, thinks about it for a minute and pronounces, "The CPU is broken." Right, the CPU is broken. Never heard that one before.
Has it occurred to you that…
Yes, it had occurred to him. Went through 3 or 4 scenarios, then he pulled out the machine-level debugger and started stepping through the code. Look, right there. The flags weren't updated right in this instruction. Yeah, whatever. He sends an email on the brand new internet to MIPS. Gets a response the next day. "Oh, you have that CPU. We've verified your issue. We will put a replacement in the mail promptly." His CPU was broken. 30 minutes from diagnosis to request to repair. For the layman, coding and debugging can be quite complex, seeing as the process is essentially many different moving components working at the same time. When a bug occurs, such as getting different outputs from the same input as the guy above described, as a coder you assume 99% of the bugs arise from the code, since it's often very prone to failure. If it's not a code problem, then you blame the compiler, or perhaps the operating system you're working on, or a mixture of the OS, the compiler, and the code. Very rarely do you blame the hardware because it's simply very rare for hardware problems to affect the output of a piece of code without it being seemingly obvious that it's a hardware problem, like in this case. Thus, the fact that this guy's friend was capable of deducing that the CPU was having problems with whatever specific Unix workstation he is working with by only analyzing the inputs and outputs of a piece of code is very impressive. When you sit down for a meeting for work where you're trying to solve a big problem and someone can say, "That's the wrong question, you need to be asking," people who can say that generally understand the bigger question and all the various variables and factors in play and how everything fits together. It's some next-level action to watch the entire room go, "Wow, we're looking at trees and that guy's looking at the forest." I accidentally got a promotion literally yesterday doing something like this. I'm a contract attorney doing doc review and randomly get an email saying they're going to bring in 20% of people for conversations. I immediately crap my pants and assume I'm in trouble. My initial reaction is, well crap, if I had more frequent feedback I could code documents accurately with better consistency. Sort of pack a parachute for if they ask why I'm screwing up. Turns out the meeting is just a sample of people they want to ask about how management was doing, if we had the right tools, if we had too many meetings, if we needed something. Blah blah, basically just getting feedback about how the project is going. Since I already have my previous excuse on deck, I just sort of blurt it out. The dude seems really interested and takes a bunch of notes. Fast forward to yesterday. I get an email saying they want another meeting. They made me a fricking quality control team leader reviewing and managing a group of like 15 people because apparently I have such a deep insight into the importance of quality feedback in maintaining consistency. In conclusion, in a panicky attempt to push blame aside, I cheat-coded the right set of buzzwords to finagle a promotion I have no business having.
Anybody who can explain highly complex things very simply. It takes an intelligent person to understand it, but it takes a brilliant person to grasp it so fully they can dumb it down to explain it to anybody. I think it was Feynman who tried to write an introductory textbook on some obscure topic and concluded that more research was needed because he was unable to explain the topic simply enough. David Goodstein asked him to explain the spin statistics theorem in an undergraduate lecturer in the 1960s and 70s. Sizing up his audience perfectly, Feynman says, "I'll prepare a freshman lecture on it." But he comes back a few days later to say, "I couldn't do it. I couldn't reduce it to the freshman level. That means we don't really understand it."
This seems to have motivated his 1986 Dirac lecture on spin statistics theorem. I feel like this gives me good cause to blame all teachers in my life for simply not being intelligent enough to explain the subject to me in a way that I understand. Actually, maybe this is a dangerous excuse to give to the less intelligent among us. A kid in 2nd grade already knew algebra. Everyone knew he was smart. For April Fool's Day that year, our teacher decided to be cute and give us a pop quiz, so she went to the 8th grade class and asked for an algebra test, made copies and handed them out to us. Some of the kids were freaking out, and the teacher assured us that we had already went over this. So she left the room and some of the kids are crying. She came back in after a few minutes and said that it was a joke, but she graded the tests anyway. The smart kid scored an 18 out of 20. My dad had a business trip in Seattle that I tagged along on so I could see a soccer match and explore the city. He invited me to go to the research hospital with him one day, and I agreed. They were working on testing some type of cardiovascular tool on a cadaver that they would stimulate blood flow in to test. Seeing my dad, who didn't go to college, barely graduated from high school and lived on welfare with a single mum, and who knocked up a teenage girl when he was a teenager himself, perform surgery on a cadaver using a tool he invented that could potentially save thousands of lives, blew my mind. He had hundreds of patents on devices. I got surgery 3 years ago, and my shoulder surgeon used a tool he invented in the 90s. He's an incredibly smart and hardworking man who got just the right amount of luck to get him where he is today. I like it when you meet someone whose English is imperfect, but you realize they're very intelligent and are able to explain their thoughts. I remember once meeting a Japanese archaeologist who wasn't the best English speaker, but when he explained his research to me, it was absolutely fascinating. There was this dude I worked with ages ago who emigrated from China. The higher-ups would get pretty frustrated with him because he was constantly coming up with clever ideas and interesting new ways to do things, but they just wanted to keep the status quo. Some ideas were decent, others likely were brilliant. Anyhow, his spoken English was downright brutal. His written English was perfectly fine though. Eventually he left, probably out of frustration. Got to plug my dad here. Had some friends over, and just to mess around we asked him the definition of random words in the dictionary. We opened it to the eyes and asked the question of 10 to 12 letter, 3 to 4 syllable words. Not only did he nail all of them, but most definitions were verbatim. When he got to the 10th word he goes, "The verb or the noun?" and we lost our crap. It was seriously ridiculous. We were freshmen in high school and could hardly pronounce the words we'd picked. Turns out he read the whole dictionary over the summer when he was 16 and bored. Guy is still the smartest person I've ever met. Wife is smart. Like 6 languages, fluently smart without breaking a sweat. Has never not done well in school, always gets promoted, etc., etc. But no one in my family saw this because she's an introvert and tries to keep herself dumb so people get her and like her. My family and I are smart. She's next level up. So after we got engaged, family had a get-together. As in cousins, friends, lots of people. As usual, we played some group games. She was reluctant, but I pulled her aside and asked her to try and fit in. She obliged, but was annoyed with me. Started with Pictionary. She schooled everyone in the room. Moved to a bunch of card games with a single deck. Counted cards, knew everyone else's decks, etc. Quiz board game, knew all the answers. Over and over again, she was dominant to the point of silencing my family. It was unnerving for me. A few weeks later, when we visited her family, "Oh, we don't play games with our daughter. She plays to decimate the competition." I wonder if this person's wife went on to be their family's favorite child, as is often the case with partners. Could go either way after that thrashing. Aziz, a 10-year-old orphan boy in the village of Burkina Faso, built his own ukulele. I would play my ukulele at night for children, and one day he came, so excited to show me the ukulele he built so that he could play with me. He built it with an aluminium can, a wooden board, and 2 pieces of metal wire to have enough tension that it played a note when plucked. Granted, you could only play the one note, but I was so impressed with him. Made it that much sadder knowing he would never go to school and that I had to leave him behind. Found out my little brother, age 12, has a legit photographic memory. He's a big Lord of the Rings fan and knows an abnormal amount about the series. Whenever he answers questions about it, he looks and squints a bit. I ask him about it and it turns out he's just reading the book in his head. He can even jump to random page numbers. He also knows a ridiculous amount of world history. I go to him when I need help with that. Sadly, he's adopted and we don't share the same genes. Lawyer arguing in front of the Supreme Court. He cites something from a law book, stating it can be found on page 84, and one of the justices motions to a clerk to get the book. The justice receives the book and tells the lawyer that no such thing is found on page 84. The lawyer responds, "Perhaps your honor's edition is incorrectly paginated." It was.
Cruise ship/hotel workers of Reddit, what is something you aren't allowed to tell us? Odds are someone died on your cruise. Think about all the old folks you see get onto the boat. For a lot of them, this is their retirement home, and cheaper than a lot of other retirement homes. They are literally taking cruises until they die, and we eventually find them in their cabins. Get a free fridge in your room. Say it is a medical need for medication. HIPAA laws mean they can't pressure details out of you. May not work for smaller motels/hotels, but should for most larger hotels or cruises. Vegas hotel worker here. It works. If it's not for meds, I'm supposed to charge you, but I don't, because I don't get paid enough. May use this in the future. I am diabetic and am supposed to keep insulin refrigerated. I currently work as a housekeeper for seasonal/summer. People leave anything and everything behind. Forget your curling iron? We probably have one. Need a charger? Yep. Toys for your child? You got it. If you ask while we're in between rooms or cleaning a common area, we'd love to help you out. No one really asks. These occurrences/policies may not be the case at every hotel. The staff on most all cruise lines are not trained nearly well enough to handle an abandoned ship situation. It will be chaos if it were to happen on a large vessel. The safety briefing you go to is just theater, and we want to be there even less than you do. Norovirus is way more common on ships than you would think. Security staff on ships are poorly equipped to handle a major security breach like an active shooter situation. The words "bright star" over the PA indicates a medical emergency is happening, and it's a page for medical staff to respond. The captain earns bonuses for saving fuel. Leaving port early or arriving late means the ship can go slower and conserve fuel, which means more money for the captain. Hotel worker here also. When you bring your children to our hotel for sporting events, baseball tourneys, etc., we really hate you more than them because you get drunk and ignore them while they tear our hotel apart. Take care of your kids, people! I worked for a fancy restaurant in a tourist town that catered to cruise line passengers looking to get away from the ships. Our desserts were frozen and shipped to us from a company named Gourmet Chefs. So when you read the menu description and we say that all of our desserts are prepared by gourmet chefs, we aren't lying. They were just reheated and prepared by a high school kid making $3 an hour. Hotel worker here. Ask for everything you need. It will be provided. Also, complain about every problem you see. You won't believe the amount of free stuff complainers get. It's awful. And never forget to tip your bellboy. I don't exactly agree with complaining about every problem you see. That sounds like a great way to exploit some stuff. At the Fairfield Inns and Suites, they're only supposed to comp you one room. I found a used condom, crap in the bathtub, and a handgun in my room. They comped me 2 weeks worth of rooms. I did not keep the gun. I worked at the front desk of a decent hotel for a year. We had all sorts of stuff to give to guests if they needed it. Toothbrushes, toothpaste, razors, sewing kits, whatever. But we also had huge boxes of tampons in the back. Like, probably more tampons than a single person could consume in a lifetime. And yet they were by far the rarest thing guests asked for. Maybe because I'm male, but still, if I was a girl, I'd be all over that. Oh, buddy. Oh, you sweet summer child. You have no idea how many boxes of tampons girls go through. This was 7 years ago, so policies might have changed since then. Ex-hotel employee here. If you ever need to cancel a hotel reservation, but it's already past the cancellation deadline, just call and move your reservation up a few days. Wait 5 minutes. Call back, now well within the cancellation window, and cancel your stay for free. Hotel worker here. I wouldn't do it. I would get in hot water. The next shift, however, would have no way of knowing when your reservation was changed and would absolutely cancel it for you. I worked as an improv actor on a cruise once for 6 months. What we don't tell you is, half the show is scripted. We just tie in your suggestions. User Pixie Alex had some great insights onto what goes on below the decks on a cruise ship the last time this was asked. I'm a cruise ship worker. First one is, we don't want you to know that we actually have more fun than the guests. Sure, we'll work the big white-hot party that you're all going to, but once we finish our shift, all heck is breaking loose in the crew bar. Just below and to the sides of where you are sleeping, there are crew members doing it, smoking and drinking. Our beers are $1. No drugs or spirits though. We also don't want you to know that all those funny jokes we tell you at bingo? Yeah, same ones are said every single cruise. That really funny answer you gave us about your wife during the Happy Couples game? Heard it. It was said last cruise, and the one before that, and the one before that. We are not allowed to screw the passengers, but we do know all the nooks and crannies the cameras don't reach. There are morgues below deck and a jail cell. We get at least 3 deaths on board a month. Some people go on a cruise to die. And no, I do not know where Jack/Rose is. They're not real people. Hotel worker here. Worked evenings and overnights for a few years now. This all doesn't apply to all hotels, but many. A lot of these will depend on how you treat the staff. Chargers are the #1 most forgotten item. We have tons of them. If you are nice and ask where you can buy one, we will offer one. I don't care who you're banging in your room. And no, I don't know where to find hookers. Well, I do, but I'm staying out of that. We know what's good to eat. We also know where you will get sick from eating. Sometimes it's both, and I'll warn you. The pizza guy tells me if you stiff him on the tip. If you're an awful person, I'm less inclined to go out of my way to help you. I will not disclose whether you're here or not, but if the wife spotted your truck in the lot, you're still screwed. Use the safe for valuables. Most housekeepers are trustworthy, but are humans that are around your valuables. I can give you a discount. We have a little leeway with the price of your room. If we're not booked, I can knock off some cost. If we have one room left, I can also jack up the price, and my bosses will reward me for it. I have also jacked the price up just because I don't like someone. Had some tweakers come in. Every time they asked the price again, I raised it $10. They ended up paying $130 for a $90 room. Food quality varies. Don't expect gourmet meals. We only have a microwave and an oven. The eggs are from a box, but are still real eggs. Muffins are like the ones that come in tubes. Gravy is powdered mix. Everything is Cisco, so it's not bad, but it's not great. Be wary if you see a Smart and Final truck outside. Their quality is garbage. I can't always fix a noise complaint. If it's the people directly above you with kids running around, I can get them to stop. If it's some loud intimacy and I can't pinpoint where it's coming from, you're going to have to wait it out. If you leave change out after leaving for the day, housekeepers assume it's a tip. Don't complain when 70 cents is missing from your room. I will tolerate your crap, but only to a point. You could be rude, but if you get abusive, name-calling, making a scene, etc., that's over the line. Yes, I can kick you out. No, you won't get me fired. Yes, I will call the cops. No, there was no one else in town to stay on a Friday night. Yes, I'm still going to charge you for the first night. Cancellation policy, especially if I can't sell the room again. We have everything you may have forgotten. Toothbrush, razors, sewing needles and thread, deodorant, etc. Just ask. If we're booked, I will tell you so. Asking again will not magically make a room open up. We will call you a cab, but you dang well better be ready. The cab drivers have no patience for tourists. They know you're not long-term business. If you do drugs in the room, keep it quiet and don't do anything that requires smoking in the room. We will call the cops and they will arrest you. The cops are our buddies. I'm in a small town and I'm on a first-name basis with them. We are a huge revenue stream for the city. If I call them, they're usually here before I hang up. They will always side with us. A night in a cell for trespassing is not fun. As an aside, they don't bother me at drunk checkpoints, so that's nice. Don't steal from the room. We will bill you for it. It will cost more than you expect. If you damage something, come clean. If it's something the maintenance dude can fix, we'll probably just bill you for supplies and an hour of his time. If you try and hide it, we'll bill you contractor rate. If something was damaged when you get in, let us know right away in case we missed something from the last guest. Always inspect your room as soon as you check in for this reason. People do die here. About half are old people that die of being old. The other half are people that check in to check out. It's a really messed up thing to do to the housekeepers. The housekeepers here are kind of superstitious and do not like going into rooms that people have died in. It's kind of weird knowing I'm the last person that someone talked to. Tip number 1. If you're going to screw around on your spouse, use an assumed name. The front desk agent will probably be cool and not ask too many questions a $20 bill doesn't answer. I had a guy come in and say he lost his room key and forgot his room number. I asked for his ID and it matched the last name on my ledger. Gave him a key with the number. That was protocol. Turns out, he was there to catch his wife in the act. Tip number 2, always use that second arm lock, though some hotel staff have a tool to disable that as well. Hotels sometimes overbook rooms, typically more so in the summer since that's a busy season. They're relying on some people either canceling or not showing up. Always a good idea to call and confirm your reservation on the day of arrival, especially if you're going to be late. Yay, I can finally answer this. I work at an upscale resort. Nights average $500 a night. I work in the entertainment department, meaning we help with both the daycare center and with large groups in-house that companies host. I will say that our child daycare is pretty safe. The only sketchy thing I would say is that we will always tell you that your kid has a good time, regardless if they have been crying up until just before you got there. Parents leave their numbers with us to call if the kid wants to go home, but whenever a kid complains that they want to go home, we do everything in our power to make sure that they stay. Because money. Also, the in-group activities that we do, biking, hiking, etc., are sometimes made up on the spot, since the entertainment department decided not to properly train us in all of our offered activities. Newer staff, generally the people that only work summers, are told the morning of that they're running a certain activity and given a really vague rundown of how it's supposed to go and told to do their best to make stuff up but make sure it sounds good. Companies pay thousands of dollars for these activities, but I can assure you the thought that goes into these activities is essentially zero. AmITheA here. I worked in numerous luxury 5-star properties worldwide. You will be shocked if you know the food quality in buffets. I've seen yellow food coloring added and labeled as saffron sauce. Pan-fried sea bass? Haha, it's pan-fried whitefish that comes in generic bags labeled whitefish. People change the expiration date on stuff so that the food cost doesn't increase. The amount of frozen food sold and labeled as fresh is astounding. A la carte food tends to have much better quality. I'm a front desk manager at a hotel. I want to jump in and say something before this gets real big. When this kind of thread pops up, someone always says that the front desk GSA can upgrade or change rates for a guest if the guest is nice to them or tips them. While this may happen sometimes, it's not common. If one of my employees gave someone a cheapo rate, he has to explain why. It'll come up in our reports. That being said, hotels are a ton of fun. I can't think of any big secrets, but I will say this. If you have any questions or requests, no matter how stupid or weird, let the staff know. We love to help people. That's why we went into the industry. And it makes it a lot better for both the guest and the staff when we can help you while you're still in the hotel and not when you're calling corporate after checkout to complain. I've worked at a few independent hotels in a couple tourist towns. A few things. Ask about places to eat. I know there's a Wendy's across the street or the center of town has lots of nice-looking restaurants, but one of those is pointless and sad, and the other one is going to gouge you for mediocre food. This can also apply to things to do. If we recommend a restaurant, we probably either like that place or know our coworkers like it. If we recommend an activity, it's entirely possible we were basically bribed. I would never tell someone to go somewhere I think is awful, but if there's 7 rafting places in town of equal quality, I'm going to send you to the one that will bring me sandwiches for sending you. We take your stuff. Not immediately, but if we can't figure out who you are or the number doesn't work when we call you and you forgot your $300 watch and can't be bothered to try and find it for 3 to 4 months, that's my watch. Again though, we are very honest about lost stuff. Most places I've been have some sort of file for lost and found or at least organize it by month. If you call, we will look and do our best to find your stuff, but people lose so many things that if we kept it all, half the rooms would be full of your bras and flip-flops. It doesn't hurt to ask if there's a better rate. Depending on the property, if you're nice or in a pinch, the front desk has the power to do a lot with your rate. At one property I worked at, if we were almost full and it was past 9 p.m., I could cut $50 off the rate if I felt like it. At most though, I can only really give a 10% discount, but I can do it for almost any reason. That said, don't fight about the rate. No harm in asking, but if you push or get belligerent, I'm not doing crap for you. Also, don't argue with me about the rate being right. Yes, the tax is stupid high. Yes, we're expensive. No, I won't give you the winter rates. Yes, I'm sure that's right. The computer is smarter than both of us. If you go through the internet, Expedia, Hotels.com, and Travelocity are the same thing, and they are jerks. Yeah, you'll get a discounted rate, but the fees can sometimes end up making it more expensive. They also severely undercut a lot of hotels because they have the leverage to do so. We can't do anything to your reservation without notification from whatever online service you used. Call them. They send us a fax/email. The reservation is changed or canceled. Don't call us though. We need that fax/email before we can do anything. Sorry if that makes no sense. You decided to use the service. Worked for a while on Princess. The cruise line pays for the time that any boat is docked. Therefore, it is good for the bottom line if the ship gets out of the port as soon as possible. Ports that are closer to a big city cost more money. That's why we would sometimes dock far away from a major destination and passengers would have to take a train to the big city. The ship only makes good money while it's out at sea, so I've been on voyages that would spend the late afternoon or night at sea instead of in port, in spite of 2 destinations being 30 minutes from one another. There are situations I've seen on Atlantic crossing voyages that destination locations are listed that the ship will be visiting, but no one has had good enough weather to get into that port in years. It just makes it look like there will be a destination instead of repeated days at sea. The labor force on different cruise lines tend to be preferred by different ethnicities. There are actually 2 crew bars, one for the officers and one for the rest of the crew. Boils down to being pretty racist with one for English speakers and one for everyone else. As a non-officer, I was literally not allowed to dance with customers on the club dance floor. Drinks and cigarettes are really cheap for the crew. Patter and jokes for most shows are repeated week in, week out. On Princess, there was a 9-to-1 guy-to-girl ratio among the crew. Suffice it to say that really ugly chicks were prizes. We pray you don't finish all that banquet food so we can! Oh, and untouched food eaten out of bus tubs. That's a thing. At IHG hotels, that is, Holiday Inn, Staybridge Suites, Crowne Plaza, etc., if you stay there for a funeral/death and you ask for the bereavement rate, it's close to 50% off. We also weren't allowed to mention it exists, or give the rate unless directly asked for it by a guest checking in. Something else we hid from guests: generally when a guest booked a room from a third-party company, Orbitz, Booking, Expedia, they typically paid more. Our managers had us go out of our way to hide that from guests. Lastly, if a guest came into the hotel that didn't fit their ideal guest, that is, tattoos, tattered clothes, etc., we were instructed to quote them a much higher room price, and if they decided to stay, to actually charge them this inflated price. I work as a longshoreman at a cruise ship terminal. More people die on cruises than you realize, mostly old people. Norovirus is very common, but more so during flu season. Crew members will go missing, often hitching a free ride to New York City. Rare occasion, your luggage will fall in the water being loaded onto the ship. The ship will give you a very crappy refund for your loss of luggage. And if you're going to a berth with more than one ship docked, make sure you know what ship you're going on. Idiots tend to let their luggage get on the wrong ship and have a lovely week without it. Word of advice, if you're getting on a cruise ship in New York City, if your ship leaves at 4 o'clock, get there at 1:30 or 2. You will avoid the crowds and the check-in lines, and your luggage will be attended to right away. I worked at Holiday Inn Express for a little bit. Spread a towel out on the counter before putting your stuff on it, because I know some of my coworkers would go from floor to shower to toilet to sink with the same rag. We typically get 10 rags a day to clean. They are color-coded to match the cleaner they're used with, i.e., bathroom is pink, window/glass is blue, dusting solution is yellow, and we use 2 or 3 per room. If you have 15 rooms, that means you use the same cleaning rag for 3 bathrooms. And for the guest, that's the best case scenario. I know girls who would do 12 rooms or more with 2 rags. Bathroom and not bathroom. Nobody gave a crap. The goal was to remove all traces of the last guest and make it smell nice. It was the most disgusting and demeaning job I've ever had. My friend worked on Royal Caribbean on the, if I recall correctly, Explorer of the Seas back in 2006. Said I could book a cruise through him for $15 a night, employee discount. I might have to stay in his cabin with him, but he would see what he could do about getting an unused room for me. Since he departed from Bayonne, New Jersey, and I lived close, I decided to take him up on the offer and do a 4-night trip to Bermuda. The regular room, an interior cabin, panned out so I had my own room to myself, and I got a pass that allowed me access to employee-only areas. I don't know if I was supposed to be escorted with my friend in all of the non-guest areas, but no one said anything to me when I walked around the ship as long as I had my employee guest badge with access to all the employees-only doors that my badge allowed. I certainly gave no reason for anyone to be suspicious, so that probably helped. Lots of fun to just go exploring a little bit. The crew areas were relatively clean, reminded me of hospital hallways. I saw 2 crew bars. There was one that was sort of outside, I think on the rear of the ship, and one upstairs with wood paneling. Nothing to be excited about, but was fun to see them nonetheless. That's where I did my cheap drinking. Never saw the jail, but did see the medical office. They had lots of Dramamine on the wall. Help yourself, which I did. The first night I was on the ship was rough. The crew was a blast to hang out with. Lots of really fun people. My friend gave me the lowdown of everyone on the ship one night, who had hooked up with who. As incestuous as it was, everyone seemed pretty cool and willing to keep swapping the bodily fluids. No room for jealousy when you only have so many people to bang. I hated reading that. There were definitely cliques. The entertainers hung out with the entertainers, the waiters and waitresses, and hung out with themselves. My friend worked in an area where he got to know everyone, luckily. None of the busboys were likely to bang a sexy stage show dancer, is what I picked up from the interactions. Since I was not an employee, but not exactly a guest, I was in a gray area and was unusually entertaining to the women I met. Intimacy would have been like fishing in a barrel. I'm not bragging or anything. Truth is, I really wanted to hang with my friend for the limited time that he was not on duty, not spend time with random women that I won't see again. I don't regret that. Okay, maybe a little bit. One thing I took away was just how absolutely professional the crew at Royal Caribbean were. They loved their jobs, loved making the experience positive for the guests, and took that overall experience very personally. Whatever issues I saw stemmed from humans just being human. Nothing that would turn me away from traveling Royal Caribbean, quite the contrary. If working on a cruise is something that you are mulling, I'd recommend it based on what I saw, at least on Royal Caribbean. It is a truly unique experience that I don't think enough people consider at a time in their lives when they are looking for a rewarding challenge. TLDR, Friend worked for Royal Caribbean. I traveled with him at employee cost, got access to employee areas, saw stuff, got a great impression of Royal Caribbean employees, and a positive experience overall. Could have had a lot of intimacy though.
People who have snapped on a bully at school, what's your story? I was 7 and I was a nice kid with average grades and this one bully that was taller than me. He used to be any typical bully, like trip you up on your lunch, push your head for no apparent reason. I was getting annoyed and I felt the red heat go all over my body. I looked at him and told him to stop. I looked at him, he pushes me to the ground. I stop and kicked his shins and punched his nose with all my force. His nose started to bleed and I was sent to the office. My mum had this thing where if they started it, she'll pretend she's mad at me at school and then come home saying, "Congrats. My dad said the same kind of thing. Don't throw the first punch, but throw the last," was one of his favorite lines. In my high school years, one friend started calling another a name he didn't like. Friend 2 gets angry enough about it that he actually starts to assault friend 1. Seeing this, I step in to stop friend 2 and turn to friend 1 and tell him to go to class. Tell friend 2 to do the same. Their first classes were on opposite ends of the building. Friend 2 decides to throw a punch at me, trying to get me out of the way. I proceed to pull some Matrix-like crap, sidestepping the punch, grab his wrist, pulling down and behind him, pin it against his back, and grip his forehead from behind, pulling it forward, till he can see me behind him. Essentially completely locked down at this point. From here I ask him, "You want to keep playing? 'Cause I can keep this up." He gave up shortly after that. Important to note that friend 1 was a scrawny 100 pounds at most, and friend 2 was over 300, while I was about his height and around 180 pounds. Also later found out that friend 2 and a different friend had been bullying friend 1 for quite some time before this. 5th grade, this dude who always picked on me was kicking my seat in an assembly, and I was having a terrible week and this was my last straw. I turned, punched him in the face, but I wasn't satisfied with the first punch because it felt so weak, so I figure I'm already going to be in trouble, so I went back for a second, better punch that felt worth getting in trouble over. Also, this was a DARE assembly, which was about saying no to substances and violence, so I basically learned nothing. I smashed a kid across the face with a stapler because he hit me all the time and I got tired of it. I was in 7th grade. Didn't get caught. I hit one of the nastiest people in my school with a small desk used for the bad kids. When they get in trouble. You know, the one sitting in the corner that's really uncomfortable. Yeah, I just slammed the F word in the face with it. Got 2 weeks of work detail for it, but it was worth it. Work detail? Did you go to school at a prison, or is this an America thing? I was being bullied for like a month when I was 13 or 14. Some guy from my class started messing with me, pushing, hair-grabbing, neck-slapping, stuff like that, and I didn't really know how to handle it. One of his friends from another class, a guy I had never spoken to before, tried it once and I instinctively punched him in the face. Bullying stopped. If that random guy didn't do what he did, I don't know how I would have put an end to it, to be honest. My bully in France decided to sit next to me in class and repeatedly whispered insults to me, and at one point, I snapped, took his head and bashed it into the desk. I think I would have been in deep crap had his textbook not been there. Needless to say, I got kicked out of that class and had to change English group. Couple of bullies like to do monkey in the middle with me. Didn't take me long to figure out the solution was to simply tackle one of the bullies and start punching. Haha, they actually played the Russian roulette. 6th grade, a few days before end of school year. Beat the crap out of him and didn't even stop with teachers saying so. The bully stopped, but I was sick and tired of his crap. Lucky me, I didn't have to come into school for those remaining 3 days. Best of all was that my parents were on my side. When I was younger, my sister was getting bullied by some buttheads I knew, and I was too young to do anything. My dad got teed off and went into the school. He grabbed one of them by the neck and pushed him against a wall, while his great friends ran away like little girls. End of the story, they never got close to me or my sister ever again. I know it's kind of messed up for a grown man to do that, but the school wasn't solving the problem and it was getting worse every day. For context, I'm 6'5" and have been since high school. There was a girl I was friends with who had a boyfriend. There was nothing going on between us, but her boyfriend was older and used to call me names and throw crap at me in the halls. I'm not a particularly confrontational person, so I let it go on like that for a while. There was a day when he knocked my books out of my hand and I had had enough. He wasn't nearly as big as I was, so I picked him up by his shirt and slammed him against the locker. The bullying stopped. I was 11, he was 9, but he beat up my 6-year-old sister on the bus home one day, and none of the adults would do anything about it. So after we got off the bus, I kicked his butt. He never bothered my sister or any other kid again. One of my most vivid memories of my youth. When I was 9, my babysitter's granddaughter took me next door to play on her friend's swing set. For some reason, her friend's little brother got really teed off that I was on his property. No idea what the frick his problem was. I think he was just having a bad day and needed to take it out on someone. Anyway, instead of leaving like the brat told me to, I just kind of stood there staring at my babysitter's granddaughter, and her friend is like, "Is it okay that we're over here?" This ticks the brat off more, and he storms over and punches me in the stomach. Should not have been a big deal, the kid was like 6 and I was like 9, but I happened to be standing at the edge of a small cliff above a drain ditch, and he managed to knock me back into the mud. And I had to go back to my babysitter's, take off my dress and underpants and put on some of her granddaughter's clothes. I wasn't hurt, but it was really embarrassing. When my stepdad came to pick me up, the babysitter told him what happened. My stepdad didn't have an expression on his face after hearing about this. He calmly went next door where the little brat was sitting on the front porch, being a brat, and asked, calm as frick with his arms folded, "Did you hit my girl?" The little boy's face went white. My stepdad's a big machines guy and probably looked like a giant to this kid. Brat didn't answer. My stepdad asked him again. The kid looked down and nodded. My stepdad, still fricking monotone, responded, "You ever go near my girl again, and you'll be lucky if I just knock on that door and get your parents out here." Then, my stepdad just turned around and came back over and took me home. I have never felt more loved. Interestingly, my babysitter's granddaughter wasn't allowed to bring me with her to her friend's house after that. There was a girl who always called me dumb or stupid for really no reason, from elementary school all the way to high school, until one day I finally told her that if she had nothing nice to say, then don't say anything at all. She was quiet after that and stopped doing it. Years later now, I think she maybe liked me in some weird way. A group of boys thought it was hilarious to keep our football and stop us from getting it back after it rolled towards them on the school field. They kept passing it between themselves and picking it up and trying to keep it away from us. After trying for about a minute to get the ball from them by running after it, one of them picked the ball up and kept moving it away, trying to keep it out of my reach. I took a few steps back, no longer interested in trying to not hurt them, and did a goal kick on the ball. I kicked his hand in the process, and the ball smacked him in the face and gave him a bloody nose. He didn't even try to react, he just turned and walked away with his tail between his legs. The bully would always grab my butt or slap my neck, say rude things about my nationality, and insult me. I often told him to stop that, but he never did, for a year and a half. Once in a lecture, he came to my desk and grabbed my butt. I'd had a really bad day that day too. The moment he grabbed my butt, I saw red and I was mad. I stood up and looked him in the eye, I took his head and smashed it against the wall with all I had. Nothing serious happened to him, except for the teacher being mad at him for bothering me. I was quiet and good-hearted kid, and the teacher knew that. By the way, I'm a guy, and that butthole wasn't even gay himself. Or maybe he was, but he never admitted it. I'd been bullied all year long by this guy, and it was the last week of 8th or 9th grade. Comes up to me and says some crap about my clothes or something, and I just saw red. I turned around and hit him with a palm strike to the face. The bottom of my hand connected right under his nose. He doubled over and I bolted. I heard later his lip got stuck on his braces and he had to go to the doctor to fix it. I got a stern talking to about not hitting people, although my teachers were aware of the verbal bullying. "I will put up with a lot of things, sir, but I will not stand for fashion-related insults. Have at thee!" Not at school, but I was 12 and a kid on my block constantly challenged me to fight him because he knew I didn't want to, so it was a great way for this chubby, incompetent brat to show off. One day, outside the convenience store, to his surprise, I accepted. He came towards me and I basically lifted my leg and kicked him in the stomach. Honestly, he just bounced off my foot. In shock, he came at me again. This repeated about 3 times as the expression of disbelief in his face became more pathetically pronounced. He finally gave up and ran home past my house, telling my mother, who happens to be outside, that I beat him up. But she already knew about his behavior towards me, so as soon as I explained what happened, it was all good. He wasn't actually hurt physically, just emotionally. We both learned a good lesson that day, and he actually grew up to be a decent guy from what I could tell. In middle school, we were hanging out around before classes started, and this guy who used to be my friend came up behind me and put a condom in my mouth. I turned around, pushed him up against the wall, and punched him in the face. The whole school heard about it, and they were all backing me up for the rest of the day. I didn't even get in trouble. He was super embarrassed and tried to negotiate it with me, saying, "You have to let me punch you back to make up for it," or save his honor or some crap. People would not stop teasing him about it. I think that when the teachers heard about this, they thought it was funny and I had a good rep with them, so they let it slide. 5th grade. Can't remember what specifically caused me to snap, but after spending the last 5 years being continually harassed, bullied, and assaulted by a specific boy, I'd had enough. I calmly walked back to the mounted pencil sharpener at the back of the class and sharpened my pencil to a very fine tip. Then I walked behind said bully and in a downward motion slashed him across the entirety of his back with one fluid motion. Obviously, I got in a truckload of crap for what I did. Principal insinuated to my mother that the parents of the other boy may want to press charges for my harming of their pride and joy. My mother, bless her heart, retorted back, "If that's the case, perhaps I should press charges, considering how often my son has been coming home with cuts, bruises, and welts administered at that boy's hands without repercussions from your staff." The principal moonwalked out of that conversation so fricking fast. I still was read the riot act at home though, got drilled into me that what I did was used a weapon to harm someone and that it would never be tolerated at any level. Grounded for a very, very long time. Bully gave me space, for a while anyway, went back to his usual torment after a couple of weeks, minus any physical contact. High school. One girl made my life hell. I didn't even know her or fully understand why she targeted me. She tried to run me over and told cops I walked in front of her car. One day, walking up the stairs, she proceeded to taunt me, hitting me in the back with objects and calling me names. I stopped, turned around, and punched her in the nose. She landed on her back on the landing. I just stood over her and said, "What now, B-word?" She never said one word to me after that. This happened to me in 8th grade. I was bullied from the beginning of the 7th grade, and one day, I decided to report him. I got bullied for reporting the bully. I got so mad that one day after church, I beat him up in the parking lot. I made sure I didn't beat him up enough to call an ambulance, but enough to hurt. He didn't mess with me from then onwards. I find it ironic that you beat him up after attending church, lol. Turn the other cheek with your fist. I didn't snap at a bully, but I did snap at a teacher who didn't do anything no matter how many times I told her I was being bullied. All my bullies, their parents were on the parent council. They got funding for field trips and things like that, so the kids were basically untouchable. I yelled at the teachers, telling her what they've done to me, things like taking my school supplies, excluding me from activities, calling me names, and throwing things at me, along with other things. I told him how I was sick and tired of being blamed, that it was my fault. I had no friends when every other single bully told people to avoid me. They invented this thing called Katie Touch, like the cheese touch, but you could get the Katie Touch if you talked to me. I finished it by telling her that she was stupid and was too worried about losing school funding, so that she didn't care what happened to her students. No one backed me up and nothing changed. I got a 3-day in-school suspension and the bullying got worse. Kids would take my lunch and shoes, so I'd get in trouble for not wearing my indoor shoes, and I passed out one time from hunger and dehydration from not eating. I hated that school, and I'm so glad I went to a junior high that didn't have anyone else there from my old elementary. To all teachers, just because a kid is playing by themselves, it doesn't mean that they like it that way. Also, if a kid tells you they're being bullied, then do something about it. Yeah, it seems like a lot of these kids seem to have a policy of doing nothing about the bullying and punishing the kids for fighting back. My sister was bullied ruthlessly throughout middle school, nearly drove her to take her own life, it got so bad. Her teachers and coaches did nothing despite my sister and my parents confronting them many, many times. She ended up going to a private high school much further away so that she could avoid all of those girls in high school. She ended up becoming a teacher and is such a huge anti-bullying advocate. None of this fake zero-tolerance bullcrap. If she finds a student being a bully, she makes sure they get severely punished and she puts her own neck on the line to protect the victim. She had the superintendent's kid suspended for a week for bullying. Yeah, that kid should be untouchable. She's freaking awesome. Amazing teacher and amazing support for her students. She has changed the lives of so many of her students. I was severely bullied from my earliest memory all the way through high school. The times I remember snapping were these. 3rd grade, we were putting the chairs upside down onto the desks at the end of the day, and this kid kept pushing my chair and pushing me. I turned around and shoved him as hard as I could with both hands, and he fell onto the desk behind him. The chair fell off, he fell onto the chair, and I got in trouble. 4th grade, at some Boy Scout thing and there were sodas. I got one out of the cooler, and a kid who bullied me a lot grabbed it out of my hand and walked away. I grabbed another one and threw it at the back of his head. I got in trouble, of course. 7th or 8th grade, after being bullied incessantly, I lost it and was crying and screaming and punching the lockers, and got in trouble for denting a couple of them. 9th or 10th grade, while on the bus, one of the bullies grabbed my comb out of my back pocket. He had messed with me a lot. Rather than punching, for some reason I used my open hand to slap him really hard on top of his head. He was seated and I was standing in the aisle. He complained of his neck hurting from it, and I got in trouble. Between each of these instances, I'd put up with constant bullying every day and do nothing, and no teachers gave a crap. Bullies got away with bullying all the time, but even if I simply said, "Leave me alone," with a loud voice, I was in trouble. It never made sense to me. Beat mine with a hockey stick one day after school. We were playing road hockey, he lived down the street. He just kept going, and to be honest, I saw red. I remember my dad pulling me off while I was slamming my wooden goalie stick into his side while he tried to cover his bleeding face. His parents never pursued anything, and my parents took me to counseling. He ended up nearly killing his best friend in a drinking and driving accident. Friend was never the same, he was permanently injured. The bully took his own life a few years later after he didn't make a junior hockey team. I still feel bad. I've never been in any violent interaction before or since. Now as an adult and an educator, I know he was really likely just hurting. I'm sorry, Justin. The only way we improve as a great community is to role model how to be human, and that includes mistakes, regrets, and sorrow, as much as it includes successes, celebrations, and happiness. Keep sharing it all. We all learn from our shared stories. This was in 7th grade, I think. I threw a shoe at him in a changing room. He was just picking on some random kid, and I'd had enough of his crap. I completely missed him and hit the guy that he was picking on right in the face. Everyone froze for a second and then burst into laughter, and the guy who was being picked on started crying, and I felt terrible because I meant to hit the bully. Shoes are hard to throw accurately, I guess. I tried to tell him that it was for the bully, and I guess I calmed him down a bit, also by apologizing profusely. After the incident, the mood in the changing room was lightened and everyone started being a bit more chill with each other, so I guess it was a success. This wasn't me, but a quiet kid at school one of the bullies was picking on. The quiet kid never reacted, even when the bully punched him. This went on for months, and the bully was always trying to get this guy to fight him, and the kid always said, "I don't want to fight you." Then one day, the bully broke this guy's art project on purpose. He was about to hand it in to be marked, and the kid snapped. He belted the absolute crap out of this bully. We actually had to jump in and break it up because he was going to kill the guy and didn't look like stopping. I will never forget the bully turning up at school a few days later, and his face was so swollen and one eye was completely closed, and black and blue from all the punches he took to the face. I learnt 2 things that day. Bullies are cowards, and always be wary of the quiet ones. There are 3 things all wise men fear: the sea and storm, a night with no moon, and the anger of a gentle man. Patrick Rothfuss. In 4th grade, this kid named Nick used to punch me every day at recess. I went home one day crying about it, and my dad told me to punch him back. So the next day, when Nick came around to punch me, I whipped around and just beat the crap out of him. Absolutely wailed on him. One of the teachers noticed and took us to the principal's office, and we got off with warnings. After that, Nick never punched me again, but would make sure I could get to the front of the line for the drinking fountain and picked me first for any sports game he was team captain for. Good story, but what a lousy dad. Report stuff like this to the school and let violence be the last, defensive resort. Year 7, so I was 12. Part of the bullying included this other girl being a butthead about getting into our lockers. She had the one next to me, and they were both on the ground, so we'd have to put our bags on the floor when we wanted to get into them. If she got there first, then I had to wait for her to finish before I could get to mine. But if I was there first, then she'd shove my bag out of the way and wouldn't be patient at all. It sounds unimportant now, but this wasn't the only thing that was going on. One day she grabbed my bag and shoved it out of the way like normal, and I snapped. I yelled at her, explaining exactly how she had been being unfair and that she needed to take a fricking decision on which way it was going to work and then stick to it. She and her friend literally had their mouths hanging open in shock, which is a sight I'll never forget, and the lockers stopped being an issue after that. She decided on patience rather than shoving bags out of the way. I wish I'd lost my crap at the bullies more often. Maybe the rest of it would have stopped sooner. So I grew up moving around a lot with mum and dad. Unfortunately, that meant me being the new kid quite a bit. I was a pretty awkward kid, but generally managed to make friends. Except one particular school. I was there for 3 years, which is the longest run at one elementary school I have ever had. Anyways, the popular girls would bully me constantly. I was about 50 pounds, soaking wet when I was younger, and was on average skinnier than most. They would call me anorexic and ask why my parents starved me, etc. They didn't, my parents were, and still are, amazing. But one day, the popular girl asked me to give her a push on the gliders. You'd hang onto a T-bar and push off from one, but platform to the next. Well, I pushed her, really hard, and she fell off and broke her arm. I transferred schools the next week. I was about 8 and punched one of my bullies in the throat. Nearly fricking passed out too, the little B-word.
People who have ever hired homeless people with the "will work for food" signs, what was your experience like? One super cold night over Christmas break a couple of years back, my roommates and I were walking to Taco Bell and saw a homeless man laying in the parking lot. He had a cheap, thin blanket, so we brought him some food and asked him if he wanted to spend the night inside, and he came back and stayed at our house. Via Facebook, we helped him find his daughter, who he hadn't spoke to in a couple of years. He was able to wish her a Merry Christmas. I spent the night worrying that he would steal everything in the house. When I woke up, the blankets were neatly folded, and he had left us 2 pairs of socks and some deodorant. A week later, we came home to find that someone had raked all of our leaves for us. Haven't seen him since, but I hope he is well. 10 out of 10. Would do again. Lovely story, dig the human kindness. I myself could not help someone to that degree, allowing them in my home, but that's because I have skepticism and doubts in people's human nature. In college, I got my fraternity to hire a homeless guy I always talked to do security for our parties. I went to college in a pretty crappy city, and my fraternity never turned people away from our parties, so we sometimes had to worry about gang members wandering in. I actually met a former Latin king who was pretty cool. The school wouldn't provide security since it could be seen as them condoning underage drinking, so I suggested we hire this homeless guy I knew who was always at my go-to Munchies gas station because he had actually helped me out when I almost got mugged once, and knew a lot of the less than savory characters. We told him we just needed him to let us know if there was anyone he knew might cause a problem. Dude was more professional than most bouncers at the bars I've been to. He made everyone that wasn't obviously a student show their neck and wrists for gang tattoos and ran a tight goddamn ship. Our president ended up getting him a bouncer job at a club downtown. That's a little more my speed. Give a man a fish, teach a man to fish, yada yada yada. I'm sure you all know the saying. I was homeless for 4 years, 15 to 19. One day I applied for a security guard job at the local hospital for a joke. Was punkish at the time. When I showed up, I almost scared the guy off, but he shook it off and asked me to stay for the interview. For the first half hour, he asked me questions one would ask any applicant. After he finished, he looked at me and asked me my story. We sat and talked for close to 2 hours. I got my stuff and was preparing to leave when he came up to me and told me, "Cut your hair, take off the piercings, and be here on Wednesday. You look like a guy that could use a chance in life." I went back to my hole that night and thought things through. It was August 16th, 2001, and I've been off the streets ever since. Sometimes all we need in life is a chance to prove ourselves. That last bit rings so true, but it's such a shame because I've seen a lot of people squander that opportunity in turn or short-term satisfaction. I once picked up a hitchhiker that was trying to get from Washington to New Mexico when I was camping in Yellowstone. He had family in New Mexico that offered to help him and had a good job lined up. He just had to get there. So we packed him up and took him back to Colorado with us. He stayed on our couch for a week or two and picked up our mess and took care of maintenance I grossly neglected. My roommates and I were in college at the time and partied 3 to 4 days a week, so you can imagine the mess. The little money he would get from doing odd jobs for neighbors and such, he would buy food and beer for all of us. One day I had an errand to run about 50 miles closer to his destination, but still 300 plus miles from where he needed to be. He came with me, and when he got out of the car, handed me a letter and said, "Don't read it until I get home," then walked through a field straight towards the Rocky Mountains. When I got home, we all read the letter, and it was the kindest set of words I'd ever received. About a month later, we get a call from an area code I don't recognize. It was him. He made it and called us on his first payday at his new gig. He also told us about the remainder of his journey. Turns out he walked and camped a large portion of the way back. I have since moved multiple times and grown up a bit. He's still welcome back whenever he wants, though. I hope all is well, Freddy. Maybe it's because I watched the first half of Batman Begins till 2 in the morning the other night, but something about that just sounds so cool. He turned away, walked through a field towards the Rocky Mountains. Cool AF. We've hired hundreds of them over the last 20 years, mainly because I'm lazy and I can make more money with my time doing what I do. The only really memorable one was Tavion. Tavion stopped me in our parking lot one Friday morning and said he needed some work and he was willing to do whatever we had. Just the day before, I'd gotten a notice from the city saying the bamboo on our back lot was getting out of hand, and we needed to get rid of it. It's a little over an acre, and if you've ever seen how bamboo grows, there were thousands of 20-foot stalks. Told him I'd give him $100 to do it. Gave him a machete and figured I'd never see him or the machete again. Over the course of the day, he cut every damn piece of the bamboo down and had them laid in a couple of huge piles. Paid him his money, thanked him, and told him I'd get my guys to haul it to the dump Monday. He asked me if he could have the big pieces first, and I gladly let him. Came back in Monday morning and he was back in the lot helping somebody load a monster-sized load of bamboo onto a trailer. He'd spent the weekend cutting all the branches off and trimming it into 6-foot-long sections and was selling them all for $350 to a local plant nursery he'd done day labor work for in the past. We talked about it for a few minutes after the truck left, and he just kept smiling and saying there was a hustle in everything, you just had to find it. That is some real good advice from Tavion. In Chile, my father and I parked in a sketchy neighborhood when we went to visit some family. Dad sees a homeless guy and gives him $5 and tells him to watch our car. Later, when we're walking back to our car, we see some guy trying to take our windshield wipers. My dad's about to yell something when our homeless guy comes running like a bum out of hell, punches the guy in the back of the head, and the guy runs off. Homeless dude chases after him, but my dad tells him to calm down. Dad gives him some extra cash and we have dinner with him. 10 out of 10 would hire again. Well, technically your father hired him. Also, there's something strange about the possessive language in saying, our homeless guy. I tried once, really just wanted my lawn mowed. Told the guy I'd cook him a meal if he mowed my lawn. All I got was an FU. He was literally holding a sign that said, we'll work for food. Maybe he really was just looking for money. Maybe because I was 19 at the time he thought I was messing with him. I guess I'll never know. Unfortunate, but perhaps the man's been burnt too many times. Unsure if he was homeless, but a young man on a bike asked to paint the numbers on my curb for a donation. I was noticing that it was illegible just the other day, so made sense to have it done. He'd done my neighbor's house and it looked good enough, so I said yes. We chatted a bit. He said he'd been laid off and couldn't find work. I ended up giving him $10 for about 10 minutes of work. He did a really nice job. 2 cans of paint, a pack of number stencils, and his positive attitude was a good investment on his part. I well and truly hope things worked out for that guy. Sometimes when you fall on hard times, you might not have a glamorous backup plan or anything like that, but as long as you're making money, as long as you haven't given up and just decided to wallow in your failure, I'd say you still have a chance of picking yourself back up. My parents have a house in Florida they rent out. My dad was down there doing repairs to it when a homeless man on a bike stopped by and asked if my dad needed help. Dad decided to hire him. Alton, the homeless man, helped my dad repaint the house, mow the lawn, and cut out all the overgrown plants. When the house wasn't rented and my family was up north, my dad paid Alton to mow the yard and keep an eye on the place. While working with my dad, Alton asked my dad if he could borrow some money to buy some nice pants and shoes for an interview he had for a job. Dad wasn't sure he could trust him yet, so instead my dad took him out to a store and they went shopping together for these items. Alton got the job as a chef and eventually got himself a room in a house with some other guys. Occasionally, Alton will ask my dad for some emergency money and he always finds a way to pay it back. I find it interesting that my dad was so open to work with Alton due to him being both black and poor, those being 2 types of people my dad can say judgmental things about. Either way, I'm glad it all worked out for Alton. Words and the things people say can certainly give us a good insight into the thoughts and feelings of those around us, but at the end of the day, when an opportunity arises, it is the actions people take that they should be truly judged on. My family gave a man a job around our farm who was homeless. He stayed at a house on our property and worked on various jobs. He was a great guy and just made some mistakes by getting involved in illegal substances. He was a great worker and did a lot of good work. Eventually, sadly, his wife came back into his life and got him back on the junk. He pawned some of our equipment off and left. Either way, they can be great workers, but sometimes there are deeper problems that are reasons they are homeless in the first place. I was waiting for it. I was waiting for a betrayal, and this is a pretty damn bad betrayal. Pretty late to this, but hey, I feel good for what I did. I was a shift leader at a Hardee's, Carl's Jr. for you West Coast people, and it was perfectly located near where the homeless and all the skate kids hung out at. Both groups used to come in and harass everyone before I became a shift leader. Once I got to that point, instead of yelling and kicking them out, I decided to sit them down and ask what's going on. Come to find out, many of those teenagers and kids were either living in abusive homes or even homeless. I got the idea to keep the food people mess up and even using my manager meal to feed these poor kids while I could. I became real close with many of them, and to this day keep up on all of them. One in particular used to be in and out of jail a lot. I promised him every time he comes out, I'll buy his first real food. Well, after a while I moved jobs and got him a job where I worked at. A few months later, helping him out with what I could, he got a place. His girlfriend, who was pregnant at the time, moved in and they are doing great and their baby is adorable. Being able to help and understand so many of those kids now really changed my view on so many kids and why they act the way they do. I really have nothing else to say except good job. A lot of these stories have been a lot more positive than I was expecting, and I have very little to say after a certain point. A homeless guy came by my house when I wasn't home and asked my roommate if he could pick up the sticks in the yard. My roommate gave him some money and the guy left without doing anything. A few weeks later, the guy came by when I was home, but my roommate was out. He started telling me I owed him money for cleaning up my yard. I had never seen him before, so I told him to get the hell off my property before I busted his head open. He left and then came back, broke into my house a few days later and stole a guitar I'd had since I was a kid. Heartwarming? No. Well, great googly moogly, is the latter half of the video going to be about how people shouldn't be too naive? I hired a homeless guy years ago when I was a construction superintendent building condos, Frank. He was a super hard worker, always showed up on time, usually before me, waiting at the job site. Frank was a former high school football star and was ridiculously strong, so anything that required brute force was Frank's domain. He also already had a lot of construction experience, so he didn't need to be supervised very much. I got to like Frank a lot. Everyone did. He was a very emotional and passionate guy. He had no problem crying, even at an inappropriate time. But that's what we loved about him. He was just very genuine. But like many homeless people, sadly, he had a drinking problem, and I suspect some illegal substance problems as well. I never knew for sure. I knew he was a drunk, though. I also didn't really care because, like I said, he showed up for work on time and he kicked butt at it. Anyway, since I was young and naive at the time, I took a big chance on Frank. I bought him an old pickup truck for $2,500. He had recently roomed up with this Jamaican guy who seemed okay and had a place to stay. So I figured if I gave him a truck, it might be enough to push-start him into a stable life. He had no driver's license, so I told him we would work to get that taken care of, but only Jamaica could drive for now. He called his Jamaican roommate Jamaica. Well, a week later, he gets arrested for driving without a license and the car gets impounded. I was furious. I cussed him out. He cried. I paid to get the truck out of the impound lot and gave it to another friend who needed a car, and he basically did the same crap. Didn't get his license, didn't take care of legal issues he had, so let the truck just sit at his house for 6 months. I eventually just sold the truck on Craigslist. Interestingly, I ran into Frank a few years ago, and he told me he was taking classes in community college and has a place to stay, so I was happy to hear that. But the lesson is, don't be naive. I hope Frank's doing okay, but you can get burned by being too nice. Some people just aren't ready to fix their own lives, and you can't force it. Yep, that last little bit, literally the most important part. I know it seems like I'm being a pessimistic little B-word, but remember that. No joke, I hired a guy to help clean our house barn. He showed up every day and worked his butt off for months. I noticed this guy had old beaten up glasses and looked like they were 4 inches thick, and when he took them off, he was absurdly blind. I asked him when he had last seen an eye doctor, and it had been over 2 decades. I told him if he continued to save his money for a future studio apartment, I would buy him new glasses. The day finally came when he had saved $1,000, and I honored my word and bought him some new glasses, and it came out to about $400, and he literally started crying when he first put them on because he could see so much better. A few months after that, money started disappearing from the office. This barn was easy to break into if you were skinny because you could slide in under the metal gate just barely enough to get inside. After working with the police, we set up a floor mat that automatically calls the police when it's stepped on. That night, I showed up to the barn with all the police lights illuminating it. Inside the barn, unable to sneak back out of the crack under the metal gateway, was Leroy. When he was arrested, he was drunk and in possession of a pipe for smoking illegal substances. I saw him a few more times on the street, and it broke my heart. These are already getting quite depressing, but it does vary things up a little bit. I mentioned it earlier, but sometimes people give up long-term, real opportunities for work or even friendship in exchange for their baser, more quick relief habits. And if you ever find yourself in that situation, you've got to be able to make the decision on what is better for you and stick with it, as hard as it might be. Once when I was a kid, my dad and I were parking on a moderately sketchy Manhattan street around 8 at night to go to a restaurant. At the time, my dad drove a Lincoln Navigator, and when he parked it, this homeless guy immediately started chatting him up the second we took a step onto the sidewalk. I remember him telling my dad that he'd watch his car for $20 and make sure nobody messed with it while we were eating. My dad gave him the $20, and while we were eating, I asked him why, and he told me, because if I didn't give him the $20, he would have slashed my tires himself. When we got out, the dude was still standing there by the car, car, and well, it was fine. You know what, if that was his true intention, smart homeless man and even smarter father for knowing that that's probably his true intention. I was in my front yard and a man came up to me and asked if I had any work. He said he needed $9 so he could catch a bus to Tennessee to go live with his sister. He said he hadn't eaten in 3 days. He had caught his wife cheating and she threw him out on the streets. I had a couple small odd jobs and he did them. I gave him a bag of food, $20 and a story. Many years ago, after a train trip from Ohio to New York City, I realized I didn't have enough money to get home, to Connecticut. I was jokingly telling the couple that I had been sitting with on the train my woes. The man pulls out his wallet and hands me a $20 bill to tell me to pay it forward someday. The homeless man was in tears, gave me a hug, thanked me, and promised me he would. I hope he is okay. Well, at the end of the day, that's the best you can hope for, that in doing a good deed for someone, they'll keep that good deed in their heart and mind, remember it forever, and hopefully treat people as kindly as you treated them, or, at least maybe change their ways if maybe they weren't as good a person when you met them. This doesn't directly answer the question, but I thought I'd contribute. It's not really much about how good or bad the homeless guy was, but more about how he affected me. I'm not a very good storyteller, but if you want to read on, please do. I was never truly homeless, but I sort of put myself in a situation a few years back. But this is not a story about me, it's a story about my dear friend. We'll call him Sean. I have an advanced education and at the time had decent prospects of a job. I wanted to start my own business, so on a very big opportunity, I started a business, got a warehouse, office equipment, and all that. The promising line fell through, so I went to business plan B. Anyways, my ex is equally educated and stuff, but she didn't want to work to support me while I got my business taking off. Some other personal issues as well, but that is the gist of it. Anyways, we separated, and with a little bit of savings, I ended up living in the warehouse. I did get divorced eventually, since I was on plan B instead of money rolling in. I had to fight tooth and nail to make sales one by one. The business eventually grew and it wasn't doing that bad, but in the beginning it was a dark period of my life for many reasons. Divorce and being very poor was one thing, but one of my parents was diagnosed with an illness just before the split as well. Because of my immigration status, I couldn't really go to see her and I hadn't seen her in a few years. I used to think of some dark things every day for a long time, but a few things kept me going. Grit, determination, and I told myself I had to survive to go and see my parents again. But another thing was my friend Sean, my land manager, a really nice guy that put up with me living in an industrial neighborhood, hires guys in bad situations to help around here and there, ex-cons, homeless guys, etc. To be honest, from what I can tell, a bunch of them were pieces of crap, but not Sean. He lived in a warehouse on the other side of the street. I was in a bad shell where the only time I'd go out and meet other people was to get drunk. Sean helped me get out of this rut. Sean was much older than me, in his late 50s. I was in my mid-20s. He was a straight-up alcoholic. Sean moaned, was relatively sour, and kinda did bare minimum at work, but boy, did he know how to fix things. I hired him to do some work around my shop. Even though I didn't really have much money, he always did a good job. He would come over unannounced or knock on my door when I was still sleeping at like 2 p.m. It was exactly sort of the intervention and interaction I needed. He'd tell me about his divorce and about how he was heartbroken, but how time passes and heals most wounds. He'd also tell me about his folks passing. When I was talking about my parent, he sucked at cooking and made really unhealthy stuff, but he'd always bring over food if he made some. Eventually, it got to the point where whenever I felt extremely bad, I'd go over and have a beer or two. Shoot the breeze, listen to his stories of his wild youth, look at some cool memorabilia he collected, pictures of old muscle cars, drag cars he worked on, etc. When it came to working on cars and motorcycles, I had a couple of clunkers. He just helped me for free. I tried to help back by helping him keep down his alcohol intake and listen to him vent when he wasn't drinking. Of course, gave him jobs whenever I needed it and could afford to hire someone. Anyways, we came from extremely different backgrounds, especially since I was largely a kid who grew up in a good family who was pushed to get all the education I can get. Him, on the other hand, had just recently been homeless and living as a bum. In some strange ways, he became my best friend for that year. I grew the business but pulled myself out of the situation. It was no longer worth my time to hang on to this past dream and left for a job interview on a project that I'd get get paid handsomely. On the way back, I called him back to check up on him, and he told me he was just moaning about his pains again. The years had been very hard on his body, and he didn't really take care of himself, so he was always complaining about one thing or another. I just made sure someone in the area knew about it and was checking in on him, and didn't think much of that. Anyways, that was the last time I ever spoke to him. He passed away while I was making a cross-country drive back to the city. My good friend Sean came in and out of my life just as he had lived his life. I still kept this Christmas card he wrote me one year. It reminds me to be thankful, for he was there during the lowest points of my life. And to everyone else, you never know who will come in and out of your life to help you move on. That is absolutely the best and my favorite story on this topic. They cultivated a relationship, acknowledged each other's flaws, became friends, they trusted each other, had each other's back, talked about their issues and whatnot, and it's super tragic that his friend died, but at the end of the day, this dude, Sean, obviously left a really lasting, positive impression on him that gave him hope, and you know what? If you've got no hope for yourself, well, God, why not try and cultivate hope for other people?
Serious. What happened in your this is not a drill moment during work, school, etc.? I live in a small condo complex that backs up against a major highway separated by a tall barrier that's part concrete, part decorative wood. So it's like 5 a.m. and I'm dead asleep and the house shakes. I roll over thinking, man, someone set off fireworks way too late in the night. I'm barely asleep again and it shakes. This time I hear the boom and I'm like, screw those firework-loving kids. Well, I'm awake. Might as well use the bathroom. So I'm in the bathroom and the house shakes again. Boom. So I look out the back window and there's an inferno just past the backyard, right where the lawn meets the barrier. Oh, and this is right after all those people burned to death in their houses in California. Nope. Wake up the husband, shove the cat in the carrier, grab your wallet, get in the car, and leave. The only exit from the complex is right past the inferno, but we make it okay. The cat's furious. The husband doesn't see what the big deal is. He's still mostly asleep. And I'm like, where can we go to watch the news in our pajamas? So at the neighborhood Starbucks, we're watching on our phones. The local fire department hosing down our condos with fireproof foam. A gas tanker caught fire and pulled over. Then the 3 compartments caught fire individually. The driver made it out. Our place was fine. And now I have a go bag, just in case. I was at a movie theater, one of the big ones with 12 screens. Halfway through the movie, an alarm goes off and no one really reacts. And then a recorded voice advising that an emergency situation has arisen and we are to vacate the area immediately. 12 screens emptying simultaneously into the foyer created havoc. Some minor crush injuries, people falling and tripping others. It was chaos. Kids screaming, parents trying to get in to find their kids. 5 minutes later and we are still inching towards the doors, and a real voice comes on and advises it was a false alarm and to go back and they will restart the movies. Important lesson from this for everyone. If you need to evacuate from a movie theater, take the exit near the screen that goes straight out of the building and not the one that goes back into the foyer. I was in the high school gym donating blood when the alarm for an active shooter lockdown went off. The doors were very quickly locked and people were told to remain calm and duck under tables, but those of us giving blood and hooked up to the machines had to stay in place. It turned out to be that a few young men had stolen a car and had driven it recklessly onto school property. A police helicopter had somehow gotten involved, which sparked the panic. There were no guns involved, thank goodness, but it definitely was not a good first-time donating blood experience. We were all in psychophysiopatho class when the alarm bell rang. It's a class where the whole lot of us are divided in random 25 people group of students. I didn't know any of the people in this group very well, but we were polite to each other. The teacher said no drill was supposed to take place, so we all raced the best we could outside. Except I was in crutches at the time, and the building we were in was old and had a lot of stairs. I was lagging behind, getting more and more scared that I would be left alone. Our teacher was already out, and the bulk of the group was far ahead, and I had no friends in here to make sure I was safe. Before my classmates, all girls, noticed I was struggling and doubled back to help me. It could have been any kind of danger, a fire, some idiot with a weapon, but they didn't hesitate 1 second once they saw me. One of them took my bed bag, another took my crutches, the other 2 put my arms around their shoulders and half pushed me out, half carried me out. I was viewing a traveling exhibit about the Titanic. When you entered the exhibit, you were given a ticket which had the name of an actual person aboard the Titanic. At the end, you would get to see if they survived or not. Right as we finished seeing if our person lived or died, the fire alarm went off in the museum. The exhibit staff ushered everyone into the staff area behind the exhibit and down the emergency stairs. Everything was lit with emergency lighting only and really cramped, and after having just been in the exhibit, you really felt like you were escaping a sinking ship. Probably the most surreal emergency I've ever experienced. For those asking, yes, my person did survive. They tried to match your person as close to you as possible. I was a kid at the time, so my person was a child. Much higher chance of surviving if you were a kid or a woman. One day at work, there was a huge bang, not what you want to hear at a refinery. Site goes into evacuation, managers running around trying to figure out what's happened. Turns out an asphalt truck had exploded next door, rocking our site. Many undies were soiled that day. Update for those asking. The truck has a gas heater inside it to keep the asphalt warm, road tar, and after he finished his job, he left the burner going. Gets back to depot and fills truck with kerosene to wash out. Hot tank plus flammable liquid? Yeah, soiled undies. I was taking the SAT. We were maybe 30 minutes into the writing section when the fire alarm goes off. Some guy started a fire in the computer lab of the building because he didn't bring a proper ID and they wouldn't let him take his test. We had to sit outside for 3 hours in silence before they decided, never mind, you guys have to retake this in a month. Kid brought a gun to school. He wanted to show it off and pulled it out at lunch. Yeah, you're not supposed to freaking do that. He got expelled, was relieved of any actual criminal charges on account of no bullets were brought, and he was so young. But everyone dipped from the lunchroom and all the other classes got locked down. I remember being in class when it happened, and not one of us thought it was real because our school did a drill every quarter for that crap, and it was like midway through one of them. This was 8th grade. When I was in school, about 20 years ago I think, we had a bomb threat. They evacuated the entire school out to the baseball fields for hours before they let us go home early. The very next day, we went back to school and they kept us locked in our classrooms for hours while the bomb squad removed bomb material, from what I was told, from the very baseball fields that they had made us wait on the day before. Reminds me of the school I went to where the response to a bomb threat was first to gather everyone in the buses in the front parking lot and then drove us over to one of the 2 other schools in the town. Same school district. We were in high school. There was also an elementary school and middle school. And put everyone in one of 2 gyms there, a much smaller area compared to the alternatives. I eventually stopped worrying by the logic that if there were actually bombs, then whoever set them off would have had several opportunities to kill most of us if they were smart about it, since if they knew the response was to move people to another building, then they could have just rigged one of the other schools to blow and had a 50-50 chance of getting the entire population of 2 schools. Or if they didn't know that, then they still had an excellent opportunity to kill us when everyone was gathered together in the one parking lot rather than spread out over an entire building. That school had a lot of emergency response policies that seemed really stupid, and in later years they overhauled a lot of them. But I feel the response to bomb threats of gathering everyone in 1 or 2 places takes the cake, and I hadn't heard of them fixing that while I was still attending. Honestly, not sure which policy was worse though. Your school's approach of gathering everyone in the fields was also pretty bad, even if it was at least a bit more spread out. It was just at home, but I think it was May 2019. We're about to leave for a funeral and there was a sudden earthquake. I think it was a 6, and it was surreal as it was the strongest earthquake I felt. We took shelter under door frames, and nobody was hurt, gladly. I live in a town right on the Pacific coast in Northern California. We have a tsunami warning siren, and every Sunday at noon, they test it by winding up the horn to full volume for a few seconds. When the big earthquake happened in Japan in 2011, I was literally living below sea level less than a quarter mile from the coast. A tsunami was heading for the west coast of the US, a mini version of the devastating one that hit Japan. There were warnings over TV and radio, but we didn't get them because the utility company preemptively cut power to our neighborhood to reduce damage. So the first I knew anything was up was when my roommate woke me up screaming, "There's a tsunami. We have to go now." We booked it up the hill out of the danger zone, but it didn't quite feel real until I realized the tsunami warning siren was going, and not stopping. And it wasn't Sunday. To this day, that is the eeriest sound I've ever heard. I was in 10th grade, age 15 for non-Americans, when 9/11 happened. It's hard to explain to those who didn't live through it how much the world changed literally in a day, and how while there was internet, there weren't smartphones or social media, so news traveled less instantaneously. For us, we were called out of class to go to an assembly, and we were all joking around because our school had a way of over-dramatizing random admin things that didn't really matter, of the "we are searching for a new vice principal" variety. I probably still had a wisecrack grin on my face as the head of school said they all wanted us to be together to hear this news. Then she said, "The World Trade Center has been attacked," which was where my cousin worked, and I remember the room literally looked different. We were all watching TV screens less than an hour later after the second tower fell, and we got a local breaking news about a plane crash outside Pittsburgh, which is quite the thing when your school is in Pittsburgh and you think it was heading for us, because no one knew until many days later where the 4th plane was heading. Heck, we didn't even know there were only 4. So yeah, that moment with "the World Trade Center has been attacked" and how the room looked different, literally and figuratively, I will never forget that. Was showing a documentary to my class about the second week of the semester when the president of the college came on the loudspeaker to tell us to shelter in place. Somebody had tweeted pictures of his gun saying he wanted to, quote, light up the library, and when the FBI pinged his phone, he was on my campus. My classroom was directly above the library. We all knew this because of our smartphones. This was right before lunch. I was escorted out of the building around dinner time. Turned out, the student was bluffing. He was visiting our campus that day with his high school. Screw him. My college dorm had to evacuate because of fire. Some girl was making toast at 4 a.m. and the toaster caught fire. No serious damage was caused and firemen came pretty quickly, but being woken up by fire alarms, seeing everybody panicking, and then having to wait outside for like 2 hours in December was not fun. There was a shelter-in-place tornado warning. It was on that day that we learned our school had a bomb shelter below the pool locker rooms, and it was some Cold War crap. Damp concrete walls, doors with small round windows, and the lights were those old oval shaped with a metal cage like what you'd see on a submarine. Even had safety posters circa 1960 to 1970s. I was teaching at a high school a couple years back when my co-teacher came over from the next room and quietly asked if I had checked my email recently. I had not. When I looked, there was an urgent message from admin telling us that we were currently under a stay-in-place lockdown. Apparently some guy had gotten into a shootout with local PD earlier, ran and was currently somewhere just off campus, still armed and dangerous. But since he wasn't an immediate threat, we were not to tell the students and continue class as normal. If the lockdown lasted into the next period, they come up with an excuse to keep all the kids in place. The kicker for me was that one entire wall of my classroom was floor-to-ceiling windows. To make it worse, the ceiling in my room was about 20 feet. We may as well have been sitting in the field outside my room for all the security we had. I made a quick decision to shoehorn a slideshow into my lesson so I had a believable excuse to close all the blinds. Luckily, the lockdown only lasted until just before the end of the period, so nobody had to punt on an excuse for what was happening. I like to think I covered well, and that none of my students noticed that I was freaking out internally. None of them ever questioned me about it, so hopefully I did. There was an earthquake. It was not that strong, but it was still an earthquake. Everyone was treating it as a drill, which meant talking and talking and talking, until our advisor said that it was not a drill, and everyone started panicking. Good times. Last November, half my school burnt down. Everybody thought it was just another drill until we got outside and began to smell smoke. There was a mad panic as all 1,300 students were registered and registered again until we knew everyone was out. The worst part, it was started by 2 first-year students. This is going to be long, just so you know. On a 225-foot buoy tender in the middle of the Pacific, halfway between Hawaii and Mexico. When you're on a ship at sea, if there's a fire, there's no 911, so you practice all the time for stuff like fire, flooding, collision, etc. But those drills occur during the day when most of the crew is awake. You're alert, the sun is out, and sea conditions are normally good, for safety reasons. But emergencies almost never happen during the day or when the sea state is calm. It was 4 a.m. I was in my rack asleep after getting off watch, so I had only been asleep for 4 hours when the general emergency alarm went off. That's the alarm that sounds for any emergency outside from collision and chemical. So I bolt upright with the what? Thinking someone accidentally hit the alarm up on the bridge. But when the watch officer comes over the ship's announcement system saying to set the main space fire doctrine for a fuel oil leak in the engine room, my stomach drops. I'm out of my rack, into my coveralls and boots, and out to the repair locker faster than he can finish the announcement. Most of the crew is already at the locker. The attack team is getting their firefighting gear on, and the engineering officer is trying to get information from the engineering watchstander. The investigators were already gone to investigate the scene. We all get our protective gear on, and I gather my team. I'm in charge of the pump team, and our job is to set up the portable fire pumps to supplement the installed ones in case the water pressure drops. But the pumps are located outside the skin of the ship on the buoy deck, and it's 4 a.m. in the middle of the ocean. Most people forget just how dark the night is. With artificial lights, we have essentially conquered night and claimed it for ourselves, despite our relatively poor night vision in comparison to other species. But when you are days away from any land, and the lookouts need their night vision preserved for their watch, that means it is awfully dark once the sun goes down. Makes for great stargazing, though. Anyways, I get permission to start setting up, so my team and I all grab flashlights and head out. It's dark as crap, and the pumps are heavy, and all in all, it sucked. It sucks during drills, and it doubly sucks in the middle of the night. We get the first pump set up and are about to start the second when we get told to wait. I certainly didn't complain. I absolutely hate those pumps. We go back into the repair locker to wait. Apparently the leak wasn't that bad and was able to be secured by the investigators. The cleanup crew heads down to clean up so the fuel doesn't create a toxic gas environment, and we go to pack the pump back up. There was a general feeling of amusement at the situation, to be honest. Also, a lot of pride in our response. We hit all the time requirements, setting up boundaries and such, and as a crew, we felt like we did good. The command felt the same way too, because the workday was suspended. We only had to go to our watches. The rest of the day could be spent however we wanted. There was a movie being played in the cruise lounge, and some of the guys set up an inflatable pool on the buoy deck to chill in. Me, I went back to sleep. This one's an even longer story. My dad is second engineer on gas tankers. A few years ago, they had a fire in the middle of the freaking Atlantic. Ship chock full of flammable, toxic, cooled down to liquid gas. I can't remember what it was, but they got it to negative 150 degrees Celsius or lower. Maybe ethylene? Skeleton crew, as crew management company was full of money-grabbing jerks, and every single thing that wasn't officially needed was underfunded and limited. I.e., ship had 3 power generators, but ship management allowed them to buy only so many parts. They had to cannibalize the third to get other 2 required by law to run, and everyone was overworked. Middle of the night, a fan sucking out exhaust from the trash burner failed, and temperature started to rise. Sensor failed first, so there was no alarm. At dog hour, metal chamber the burner was in literally melted. Metal started to burn, and first alarms blared. My dad, off duty then, informed Bridge by intercom, told them to organize action, and went down to get people out and start action. He broke procedure by that because he was supposed to wait for Bridge order to even begin any action. That includes inspection on fire size. He got in serious trouble in that later, but I'll go back to that. So he gets into gear as fast as he can, bursts down and in, drags 2 unconscious guys out of control room, starts emergency water pumps, empties both FEs that were there in vicinity on burner chamber door, glowing now, to cool it down a bit, and runs up to get proper equipment and join team. They start firefighting and soon discover almost everything there was on fire, melting and burning down. They used every single FE on board, all fire retardant they have, and gas tankers carry a crap ton of it, and by next day evening they managed to put it completely down. They lost chimney, all of it. It fell down inside, almost killing crew members. Most of main engine turbos and exhaust management, good part of electrical wiring, including electrical power control, so no load regulation on generators. Most of the bridge equipment was out, oil coolers and general crew area AC. They were also down to 1 power generator. On top of that, entire ship was considerably heated up, which meant lots of stress in the hull and gas tanks. They were venting gas as cooling equipment was overloading the power generator. Radar, satellite, high power radio, all off. They slowly creeped to US and got to Houston with Coast Guard and firefighting barge assist. Now, the true storm starts. First, they got an inspection, which revealed they didn't have enough firefighting equipment on board. Inspectors were deaf to the argument that it has all been used. Fine number 1. Second, after unloading the gas, they got a hefty fine for the gas being too hot. No duh. Also, another fine for vented gas, because cargo manifest didn't match with ship's content. Third, another fine for environmental damage, as main engine exhaust was not cooled and filtered. Lack of chimney and fire marks were of no consequence to port authorities. Next, my dad got into trouble. Ship management decided he was to pay the fine of $100,000 for not waiting on Bridge's orders. Later withdrawn, as inspection shown if he hadn't cooled down the door, no one would ever got in and 2 people would die. Also, seawater pumps couldn't be started in any other way. They still threatened him in every possible way and tried very hard to make him assign responsibility for whole fire and damages. Sadly, he was very, very close to doing it before I forced him to be with my friend, a lawyer. And the last, most infuriating part, ship management refused to pay for firefighting equipment replacements as, quote, it was crew that used them, without permission from central office. After that, they did 1 more cargo run around Mexico's ports before ship was forwarded to a shipyard for repairs. Most of the crew changed company afterwards. Yeah, cost-cutting in the most obnoxious way, haranguing on every single regulation, as long as there is even a slight chance it will slide under the radar, and complete disregard for the fact that crew is human, not a bunch of robots. My dad was a firefighter. He was casually watching Titanic at the theater. You know when this happened then. Out of nowhere during the movie, projectors stopped, all lights shut down, and some guy opens the door of the theater and told everyone to get out that there was a fire. As my dad walked out, his firefighter senses were triggered. He felt the draft of air being sucked out of the theater room going into the main hall. Fire alarm couldn't be heard from inside because the volume of the movie was so loud. Everyone got out. It was a big complex with restaurants and bars next to the cinema. Everything burnt down, millions of dollars of damages. It was a teenager playing with matches while smoking behind dumpsters. My dad had to wait for the double VHS to be released to know how Titanic ended. That's the best part of the story happening in the 20th century. For the record, it was in 1998. We had someone fall off a boat down at the boat launch when I worked at a campground. She hit her head on the dock and started sinking while unconscious. Luckily, her BF dove in and grabbed her before she drowned. However, she was incoherent, so we had to immobilize/warm her up in a truck and then call in a heli to take her to the nearest hospital. It was crazy. We had to mark a landing zone and lay down some flares and everything. School had a lockdown. Was coming back from lunch and saw a bunch of cops. asked one what's up, and was told someone had reported a gun in the building and it's on lockdown. I went home. Found out the next day, kid had a BB gun in his backpack, and I guess ticked off a friend, who then told the office what he had. Side note, the group that kid would run with was known for starting fights with people over nothing, so I guess karma is a jerk. It was woodwork, and in my classes, we have a dust collector connected to an automatic sander, and a nail happened to get sanded and made sparks to fine wood chips, so it exploded in fire in a woodwork building. I was still working as a hostess, and we had just opened up. In the morning, we usually only have 3 servers on the floor for the first 30 or so minutes. 5 to 6 families immediately walk in, which is good for the openers. Everybody gets 2 tables to start. I was seating the last of the families when I heard a horrible wail from the back. I honestly didn't think anything of it at first, until I realized 2 of the 3 servers hadn't come out front to greet their tables. One of the servers, while switching out the tea bags, scalded herself across the face with boiling water. The second server was already calling paramedics and trying to keep her calm while she went into shock. So now I had 1 server for 6 tables. About half of them were intensely understanding, but one family was giving me max attitude. I finally snapped at the wife and said, "Ma'am, the server in charge of your section just suffered 3rd-degree burns across her face. If you're in such a rush that you cannot wait for emergency crews to get here, I would be more than happy to suggest other establishments that can accommodate you." Right at that moment, the EMTs arrived. 6 huge Captain America stunt doubles finagling the gurney through the restaurant. She shut right up. The server ended up being okay and didn't have any permanent scars, but for the rest of the day I was jittery from the adrenaline rush.
Lawyers, what is the dumbest thing your client has ever done? Mine wore a shirt that said "Natural Born Killer" into a hearing for an assault charge. I had him turn it inside out. He went down anyway, but at least it was for, actually assaulting someone rather than the shirt. Cashed in their retirement while in bankruptcy. When it's in cash, it's not protected. My all-time favorite is a client I had who was charged with DUI, who wanted to challenge the charges on the grounds that he didn't think he was drunk and the tests were administered properly. Guess who appeared at his court hearings rip-roaring drunk twice? And then, both times, he got into his car and tried to drive away. And both times, the police promptly stopped him, administered a breathalyzer, and charged him with DUI and related offenses. We didn't win that case. I was in court contesting a traffic ticket and saw something like this. The guy was in court for a DUI and was 7 sheets to the wind. He was taken out in shackles. Fell over twice. Oof, these just sound like alcoholics. I hope they both got the AA attendance included in the sentencing. Told a client, "Don't say anything to the police, wait until I get there." He confesses to a crime he isn't even being investigated for. This was relayed to me by the RP manager of the office supply chain I worked for in high school. Individual stores didn't have RP managers, they existed at the district level. A young man, let's call him Eric, had been with the company for almost a year. He worked in office supplies and was by this time known to management to have light fingers. At some point, the store manager called in young Eric to his office to discuss his continued employment with the company. When Eric entered the room, there was a strange man who was introduced as the RP manager for the district. The conversation from the RP manager was very short, hoping to elicit a confession to the pens they knew he had stolen. "Eric, we know what's been going on. If you tell us about it, we'll promise not to press charges against you." Eric just about crapped himself and proceeded to spill all the details. The assistant manager was bringing in additional software, packing it in empty boxes of printer paper, and selling the printer paper to his friends, and somehow writing off the software as stolen or returned. Eric's job was just to fetch the boxes from the back when the friends came to pick them up. Not my client, but I was on the prosecutor's side when a defendant failed to appear for court. His attorney can't reach him, nobody knows where he is, so we all sit there for about half an hour until the judge gets sick of it and moves on with the docket. We find out later that day that the defendant decided to rob a 7-Eleven the night before and was sitting in jail 2 counties over when he should have been in court. I used to represent patients who were involuntarily committed because of a mental illness, so I wouldn't describe them as dumb, but still. Clerk: "Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?" Client: "No." This happened a dozen different times. Had a client show up to child custody hearing high on crystal. When she arrived, she began screaming at the judge and demanding that her "no good crystal head baby daddy" be drug tested. I took her into the hallway and told her that if the judge ordered a test for the dad, he would have to order one for her. End of argument. I worked for the public defender's office and met a client in jail for a lineup that he had adamantly demanded regarding a crime with multiple witnesses. I met the client for the first time in a separate room to let him know how it would go down and what to expect. This is the kind of lineup you traditionally see on television, where there are a number of similar-looking people standing shoulder to shoulder in front of mirrored glass. They pull the people for the lineup from the jail population, and despite their best efforts, this is not a huge population. I walk in to meet the client, and he has a sty on his lower left eyelid the size of a golf ball. It was the most identifiable mark on a human's face I have ever seen. He still demanded the lineup and was identified instantly by every single witness without a shred of doubt in their mind. He still demanded a trial, and the sty was gone by the time the trial commenced. In conclusion, guy with a golf ball-sized lump on his face demands comparative lineup. Judge was determining if a defendant qualified for a public defender. Judge: Sir, do you have any income? Defendant: Yes, Your Honor. From what source do you have your income? Selling Mary J., Your Honor. This happened in Illinois, and the defendant was not under oath. Honesty is the best policy, unless it involves telling a judge you sell grass for a living. Agreed. Omission is not technically a lie. Here's another ill-advised admission. When I was sitting for appointments one time, a defendant said hustling as his source of income. Everyone in the courtroom laughed a little, even the judge. I represent clients before the IRS, had a couple who owed around $250,000 in back taxes. We had no defense, so the only thing to do was have the clients meet with the IRS and plead for leniency. Well, the wife got arrogant with the IRS agent and at one point stood up and screamed at the IRS agent, who was a pretty decent person, making a very middle-class wage, "You'll take away my Mercedes over my dead body." Then she stormed out of the conference room. Needless to say, she lost the Mercedes. Not a lawyer, but this happened in court. My dad was suing a customer for non-payment. The judge ruled in his favor for the whole $15,000. The guy he was suing got up to leave, but walked over to my dad and said, "If you think you're going to see a dime of that money, you're a fricking moron. I will kill you first." He then walked away. For a second, my dad was worried the guy would get away with the threat, but he didn't worry much because the guy said it loud enough for the bailiff and the judge to hear. He did not make it out of the courtroom. My dad was a lawyer in the Navy. One of his first big cases was defending a guy accused of falling asleep at his post during Vietnam. My dad was all psyched, delivering what he thought was a well-prepared defense to the judge. The judge interrupted him, telling him to turn around and wake up his client. This guy might have had some kind of disorder. "Your Honor, the defense apparently rests." Accidentally admitted to the crime in his direct examination. Facepalm. How do you accidentally admit to a crime? "Sir, did you murder that woman?" "Yes, I did." "Wait, no, frick!" The case had gone on for years. Client was badly injured in a car accident and was about to win millions. Then she posted a Facebook status about her doing something very active and thus negating the entire case. Had to settle for $100,000. Years of work down the drain in one Facebook status. Attorney, this is Jen from the judge's office. Your client, who I see is charged with harassing phone calls, left us 87 messages over the weekend. The judge would like a word with you. Let's not jump to any conclusions until we've discussed the contents of those calls, people. There's nothing harassing about... Hey, Your Honor, just calling to see what your plans are this weekend. Some of the guys are going to Larry's. You're more than welcome. See ya. Hey, Your Honor, didn't hear back, but wanted to give you a heads up that if you are going to Larry's tonight, you should park a block east of his place. No restrictions on that block. Whoa, Your Honor, there's some major traffic on Maple Street right now. Don't know if there was an accident, but steer clear of that place, big guy. Hey, Your Honor, if you do happen to be headed to Larry's, could you pick up a bag of ice on your way? Thanks, bro. Oh, Your Honor, I'm absolutely crazy. I can't believe I forgot to give you Larry's address. 1955 Crescent. A lot of girls here, by the way. Maybe wear those robes and catch you some strange. Get down here, bro. This client sounds like that ex that everybody has. Finally taken to court. I had a brilliant gentleman on probation for narcotics trafficking and was not permitted to own or use a cell phone. He went in for a substance test with his probation officer, and his cell rang in his pocket. The police officer went to take the phone from his pocket and also pulled out a large bag of white snow that he bought to his substance test. She has a restraining order on you. You absolutely cannot contact her anymore. They moved in together. Fortunately, I was not the attorney in question, but guy is convicted of some traffic-related offenses, loses his driver's license, effective immediately, gets in the car and drives home, along with his lawyer. Not my client and not my case, but a colleague was defending a driver in a wrongful death case. The first question at his deposition was, "Please state your name for the record." The driver stood up and started screaming at the plaintiff's attorney and threatened to kill him. That went well. Didn't happen to me, but happened to an attorney I know. Client shows up for preliminary hearing on domestic violence petition, is wearing a ratty t-shirt, but his attorney doesn't pay attention to it. Attorney starts arguing and sees the judge turning bright red, fuming with anger. Judge asks the attorney if he spoke with his client about courtroom attire. Attorney looks down. Client is wearing a t-shirt that says, "I have the male organ, so I make the rules." Story is from a friend of mine. He was defending a guy in court, don't remember what he was charged with. The main witness for prosecution was on the stand and was asked if she could identify the defendant. She was scanning the courtroom and seemed confused. My friend was already silently celebrating because if she couldn't identify him, he could probably get all charges dropped. As he was mentally adding this case to the win file, he happened to glance over at his client, who had just helpfully raised his hand to make it easier for her to identify him. Even the judge face-palmed on that one. My law teacher would tell stories about a juvenile court he used to work in for one of the more questionable areas of California. Apparently, they had a real problem with defendants coming in with sagging pants and court officials showing up in beach clothes. The judge finally got so sick of it that he kept a box of rope for an impromptu belt and a box of neckties behind his desk, and he'd begin court proceedings by lobbing ample amounts of both over his stand at anyone he felt was in need of them. That's gotta be a bit terrifying, a judge throwing you a length of rope and commanding you to use it. The cops in my preliminary hearing showed up in camo shorts and beaters. I was wearing a suit and tie. I know of a judge who will hold you in contempt for showing up dressed inappropriately. Also, he hates, and by hates I mean hates, cell phones ringing during his proceedings. If your cell phone rings, you're immediately held in contempt, and the bailiff immediately handcuffs you and takes you to jail. Ah, the South. That judge seems to enjoy an atmosphere of fear and tension in his courtroom. Dizzy with power. I work as a legal aid lawyer in a Canadian province. I've had many dumb clients who did many dumb things. Wore a smoke grass every day t-shirt while attending their substance trafficking and producing trial. Attempted to smuggle cigarettes to their inmate partner via their baby's diaper. Initially pooped their pants on the way to court to delay their matter. Denied driving under the influence. Upon search by police, a full highball glass of rum and coke was located in their jacket pocket. Committed the unspeakable act on a girl. Sent her text messages from his phone the next day recalling all the sordid details. I have many more stories I could tell if there was sufficient interest. The ones I mentioned here all happened in the past couple of months. More stories. One of my first clients was a delirious hobo. When we were meeting at my office, he was ranting and his dentures fell out and landed on my legal pad. He picked them up and put them back in his mouth and continued to rant as if nothing had happened. Same guy appeared in court a few weeks later and refused to let the security detail inspect his hobo bindle. He told them that he wasn't going to appear without his bindle and left. He was arrested that afternoon for failing to appear. A guy came in and said he wanted to sue Oral-B because their toothbrushes kept cutting his gums. He asked if I wanted to see his evidence. I said no, but he still proceeded to dump a grocery bag of used, slightly bloodied toothbrushes onto my desk. Another good one, during a trial for a client in a circuit court about an hour outside of the city that I operate in, client decides to get a cab out there and tells the driver they'll pay them when they arrive. Client arrives in this community and gets the driver to stop at a local convenience store across the street from the courthouse. Client proceeds to attempt to steal 5 26-ounce bottles of rum and is promptly arrested and taken into custody. Trial is postponed as we spend the day unsuccessfully applying for bail. I'm not a lawyer, but this worked out super well for me. I was hit by this 65-year-old drunk lady who also happened to be on a substance at the time. The cops knew her husband was a firefighter, so they didn't breathalyze or do any tests and didn't charge her with DUIs. My EMTs had said, "That lady is so drunk, she's going to buy you a ticket to Disney World," which is how I knew that she was drunk at the time of the accident. But I had no proof to bring to the table in the lawsuit because if the cops didn't charge or make notes, you cannot add it later. So we get to my deposition and she shows up. She argues with me the entire time over my points, and her lawyer keeps having to tell her that she needs to be quiet. Mind you, this lady had ruined my friends' and mine lives. So I was becoming less than patient with her calling me a liar when she got off scot-free. She exclaims to my lawyer, "Even the police report is wrong." "What do you mean that it's wrong?" "It has me coming from the wrong place." "Where were you coming from?" "My friend's bar." "Really? Did you have any drinks at this bar?" Well, yeah." "How many?" "I don't know, and they don't charge me, they just keep refilling my glass." Cue to her lawyer's facepalm as all of this is on tape. Family law case. Judge had asked to interview the minor child in a closed courtroom with no parents. Attorneys couldn't stay. When done, the client re-enters the courtroom to see the child crying and tells the judge that he is fricking retarded. Right up to that point, my client was winning and was about to have the other party's parenting time suspended. The kid had said that the other party abuses him and that he did not want to see that parent anymore. The judge was not pleased. Other party's parenting time suspended. My client has anger management classes ordered, fines, psych testing, and substance testing. During a divorce, the ex-husband claimed that he didn't make much or any money and wasn't able to pay the child support we were asking him to pay. A few hours after receiving this information, he posts a picture on his public Facebook of a wad of cash talking about how ballin' he is. Needless to say, his claim didn't hold up after that. I suppose this whole collection of stories could just be called What Happens When People with No Filter End Up in Court. Acting in their own defense, of course, filed a motion to kiss my butt, in which he required that America at large and one corrupt judge bend over and kiss his butt. The motion was denied. I'm going to allow it. At first appearance, a defendant stood there calmly and quietly when the judge was reading his charges and bond information. When the judge asked if the defendant had any questions, the defendant gave the judge the finger and said, "Frick you motherfucker, go frick yourself," and then proceeded to throw down the microphone and walk away. The judge, who had been on the bench for years, replied, "Well, I guess I'll let you know when my fan club meets." Not a lawyer or in any way educated on law and court proceedings and such, so please forgive my ignorance, but I want to ask something. Say you're in court and your client does something horribly stupid, such as gives evidence incriminating himself accidentally, or confesses. What do you do? Do you just sigh, admit that you've lost, and everything stops there? Or is there any way to salvage that? Just a curious question. It really depends on the situation. 1. Real legal proceedings are rarely like Law and Order. People rarely straight up admit guilt on the stand. I have, however, had a client under oath get straight up caught in having told a lie 2 minutes earlier. Sometimes you ask for a brief recess and see if you can make the case go away. Sometimes you ask for a brief recess and take your client into the witness room and shout at them, then come back in and try to put lipstick on the pig on redirect. For example, you just said on cross that actually it was Y when you said X earlier. Why was that? Oh, sorry, I get confused. And sometimes you can't do a damn thing about it and you're just watching in horror from the counsel table. So I'm a law student, but I work at a volunteer desk that helps people complete the forms for court. The awful part is I can't give any legal advice since I'm not a lawyer, which means I can't tell these people they don't have a case. However, the stories are great. There's the lady who sues celebrities. She asked me to help her sue Robert De Niro. Someone else helped her with a suit for Matthew McConaughey. She was doing it on behalf of her kids and their fathers for in excess of $100 million. She didn't even know how to spell their names. Then there's the guy who's suing DirecTV, CNN, Fox, and who knows else. Apparently he's the one you have to thank for putting color on your TV shows and adding animation. He was suing because they hadn't paid him. Ever. Finally, there's a lady who's suing her former employers for giving her too much money on her last paycheck. She told me they did it because they liked her and wanted her to come back. There was maybe $60 extra on the check. She was suing for $10,000. Not a lawyer, but in court for a ticket. Apparently the cop lost the ticket book, so there was no official evidence. The judge said the next 15 on the docket, I was luckily one of these 15, just needed to say not guilty since there was no evidence. One moron got up there and started to argue that he was only going 5 miles per hour over the limit, not 10. The judge looked at him and said, "Son, just say not guilty." The guy again said, "But I wasn't going that fast." The judge laughed and repeated again, "Son, just say 2 words for me, not and guilty." The guy, confused, mumbled not guilty in the form of a question. The judge said, "Case dismissed." Everyone in the courtroom laughed and clapped for him. My high school best friend's father is a lawyer, and I remember him telling me this story years ago. He gets a client who's being charged with a DUI. He asks the client what happened, and the client states that he had 2 drinks, gets stopped, and the police wrongly charged him with driving under the influence. My friend's dad then looked over the evidence as any good lawyer would do. Comes to find out there was video evidence from a dash cam. Awesome. His client on video was visibly drunk, and he described it as being, "You'd be stupid to think he was sober." He was convinced there wasn't much he could do with this. There's icing on the cake though. When the police officer went to give him the breathalyzer, his client is heard stating, "I'm too drunk to use this damn thing." I'm a law student, but I have internship stories. We had a client who was convicted of murdering his stepson. Before passing sentencing, the judge asked if he had anything to say to the court. He replied, "I only effed up when I didn't kill my wife too." Life sentence. Another client, upon being pulled over and being asked if he had any substances or alcohol in the car, voluntarily told the officer that he didn't, but he did have some smack that he sold in his hotel room. He then kindly escorted the officer there and gave it to him. We had a client charged with selling white snow. In order to determine if he qualified for public defender, the judge asked if he had any way to make an income, and he said, "Well, from selling white snow. I bet I can think of more too." My lawyer brother once got a contempt of court charge dismissed against his client by begging for mercy, using a Forrest Gump-like defense. "My client is not a smart man." Immediately after the charge was dismissed, the client turned and in front of the entire court punched my brother in the mouth, yelling, "Who you calling dumb?" Client was promptly rearrested.
People who ran into the weird kid from school years later, how did he or she turn out? My friend's dad told him about the weird classmate he had. Nobody really took him seriously. When they were in their last grades, that kid decided that right after school, he'll be growing fun guy instead of studying. Everyone laughed at him. And guess what? Right now, he owns probably the largest organic farm business both in the country and most likely in the whole region. Sounds like a pretty fun guy. We had a kid that would do weird stuff in front of other kids for attention. Climb into bins, eat old food out of the bins, let people throw yogurt over him, dive into bushes, that sort of thing. Otherwise, he seemed mostly harmless. Ended up in prison for pouring a kettle of boiling water over a guy and a girl who he fancied. They were at a house party, he saw her talking to a guy, so he went to the kitchen, boiled the kettle, then calmly walked up to them and poured it over their heads. I'm not sure he had ever even spoken to her, but he was seemingly jealous that she was talking to another guy. Then, after he was released from prison for that, he took his mother's car on a joyride with two of his mates, crashed into a car driven by an elderly couple, then ran off, leaving his two mates dead and the elderly couple badly injured. I think he's still in prison for that. Not quite as bad, but we had another weird kid who would talk to no one and would spend all day drawing graffiti in a sketchbook, which he guarded with his life. Not good graffiti, he just kept drawing his tag in different fonts. I think it was Azpect, or some other badly spelt word. If he spoke, it was usually just to tell people how great he thought Banksy was. He ended up spraying his tag all over our small and otherwise graffiti-free English town, and was immediately arrested after his old teachers recognized it. I think the sketchbook was used as evidence. He was then arrested a second time for spraying his tag on the side of the courthouse in front of half a dozen CCTV cameras. I bumped into him a year or so back, and now he works for a charity which runs a kids club in the next town over. He teaches kids how to skate and BMX, as well as running street art classes where they legally decorate the skate park with graffiti. I wouldn't say I ran into him, but I occasionally drive past the penny kid walking around slumped in a leather jacket and greasy hair on a hot summer day. I really have no idea what he's doing with his life, but he still seems pretty weird. Back in high school, he was always collecting change that he'd find on the ground, and I found out later he actually saved up $500 or so and donated it to charity. I thought a lot differently about him once I found out. Didn't run into him, but randomly saw a TED Talk he gave on YouTube. He's a physicist now, and has been lobbying the government to increase funding for science education in order to ensure future generations can continue the fight against climate change. He's a way better person than I became. One kid like that died in a car accident senior year. Everyone then pretended they were his best friend and that they were so sad, etc., etc., etc. These people basically tortured this kid. Their reactions were disgustingly fake. I never realized how many phony monsters I knew until that happened. Luckily, I never had to see those people again soon after. She was actually doing really well. I almost didn't recognize her because she looked so much different. She joined the military, so was cleaned up, in better shape, etc., and seemed like she was happy. Sadly, she died in a car accident a year or so later. Girl in high school used to be really to herself, super into anime, just assumed she was shy, so I'd make a point to have small chats with her every day, until one day she said her pillow wasn't screwing her right. Apparently, her pillow had conscience, and she used it to pleasure herself. Graduated a few months later. Fast forward to about 3 months ago. I'm making coffee at a cafe when said girl walks up to me. She's super polite and bubbly, but as I ask how her day is going, she tells me that the demon that forced himself upon her was actually her guardian angel and she needed him around or something. Haven't seen her since. In case somebody needed to be told today, don't stick it in crazy. Ran into the kid who was effectively the school bully at the bank one day. He wasn't a physical bully, but made fun of everyone and was just mean in general. He walks up to me holding his daughter and gave me a classic white guy, well gosh darn it, how the heck are ya? And this is gonna sound crazy, but he legit became the nicest guy in the world. Extremely well adjusted, great family, great career. He invited me to go out to the driving range the following Sunday, and for whatever reason, I was inclined to go. Wound up hitting golf balls and smoking J's with him for most of the day and had a heart-to-heart. Turns out, he was terribly abused his entire life, and his father punished him by forcing him to stay awake all night. He was petrified to go home, so he did whatever he could to get detention. Explains a lot. Never judge someone until you've walked a mile in their shoes. There was a weird kid in my middle school who would eat hand sanitizer, cut his fingers, and write 666 on the classroom walls with his blood, and other creepy things. Apparently, he had a crush on me, and asked me to the 8th grade prom, but I declined. Fast forward to the last day of middle school. I received a message from him on Facebook saying he had a huge crush on me, and that he would off himself if I didn't feel the same. I told him that despite what he had just sent me, I wasn't interested. A few months later, we start high school, but since there's 4 high schools in my area, a lot of us were scattered around, and we ended up going to different schools. I never saw him again, but through Facebook, I saw that he started a relationship with a girl that also attended our middle school. He looked really happy, and honestly, I was happy for him. He seemed to have grown out of that weird middle school stage and genuinely seemed like a great guy. Around 2 years later, I was a junior in high school. I go to a local supermarket and just mind my business. The next day, I received a message from him on Facebook saying he was working at the supermarket and happened to see me. I messaged him back and apologized for not seeing him and saying hi. He then proceeded to apologize for all of the weird middle school stuff and that message he had sent me on the last day of 8th grade. I told him all was fine and we left it at that. Now, by the looks of his Facebook, he's a workout fanatic and his body has changed a lot. He also seems to be going to college and spends a lot of time with his family. I'm glad he's doing fine. Calmed down significantly and is happily married now. He acted out in school because he was being abused by his foster parents at home. Nobody knew at the time. I don't know, he just keeps making crappy edits of Drew Pickles from the Rugrats, going places around town and talking in a text-to-speech voice. That's hyper-specific. There was this kid in junior high that was really quiet and had no friends at the time. One day, my English teacher pulls me out of the classroom and asks me to befriend him because he didn't have friends. So I did, and we became friends. We went to different high schools, so kinda lost connection. He would text me every now and then. He found me on Facebook when he was working on his engineering degree. He is now married and works for SpaceX as an engineer. He renamed himself Green Dragon of the West. He's a network engineer, so okay, I guess. Voice actors note, a lot of these stories are about the weird kid committing heinous crimes that I cannot talk about on YouTube, so apologies if some of these stories turn up a little short. I saw her at a con I was working, where she came up to my guest and was telling him about her book that she hadn't started writing, but was due the next day and still had 10,000 words left to write. She also kept looking at her phone and dramatically sighing and saying things about how she wished her publisher would leave her alone. So, still making up things to try and make herself look better. I'm doing fine and have not murdered anyone. I was the weird kid. Mom was never really around, no father figure. We lived in a half-renovated house with animal feces through it because my mom kept her dogs indoors 24/7. We were also extremely broke. Like, Mom would go hungry to feed my sister and I. My mother, on reflection, was mentally unwell due to the depression of losing her mom 2 years prior. She still hasn't recovered to this day. I realized years later my clothes probably smell like animal feces all the time. I had very few friends in high school. I ended up getting into drugs at 13 to escape from my crappy life, plus I had no boundaries or restrictions from my parental figures. I also lived on my PlayStation and Game Boy due to not having any friends to actually spend time with, making me socially inept. Both my sister and I were eventually uplifted by welfare services, and I ended up in a boys' home for 3 years, where I finally got the boundaries and basic care I needed. I had a great social worker who worked hard to set me up with a positive future despite my circumstances. I slowly gained social skills and realized I could have a normal life. After leaving school, I realized I had a strong work ethic that led me to work up to holding management positions in basically every business I've worked in since my early 20s. It also got me through university doing a Bachelor of Social Work. Now, I'm a social worker, supporting young adults to change the direction of their lives and to have a life they could be proud of. I've just been promoted to manage the service I work for and to grow the service so it could be extended to other districts. I guess I've done alright for myself when I look at where I've come from. I'm also happily married with 3 amazing kids, whom I make my life mission to have a better upbringing than the one I experienced. For those who are asking about my mom and my sister became a semi-pro athlete and also graduated uni. She's in a long-term relationship and has a job that enables her to train for her sporting discipline. Mom's doing okay. She's still not mentally there, but she is better than she was, and she does try most days. She loves the grandkids and spoils them every time she sees them. She's got a job now and has held it down for a few months. Her decision-making is still poor sometimes, but my sister and I keep an eye on her and challenge her decisions when they're not helpful to her quality of life. He's in prison for owning, my lord. Like I said before, can't mention that on YouTube. It's CP, by the way. He was still wearing the same hoodie that he had every single day in high school, 5 years after graduation. I don't know what I'd expected, but it blew my mind. She moved to New York City and was one of the stars of a Broadway musical. See? The weird kid in school can have a successful acting career. Wait a minute, I'm pretty sure I was the weird kid. But runner-up was a very nice but shy girl who immigrated from China and loved computers, but was incredibly meek. A conversation was like prying teeth, would only make strange noises in class, etc. And frankly, in hindsight, what little she said at the time makes me realize now she was in an emotionally abusive household. Example, she had some small role in a school play in middle school. I was happy for her when I saw that her mom came, as she said she doubted her mom would come. I asked afterwards, and she said her mom said she looked like a sack of dog bones on the stage during her part. I legit did not know what to say when she said stuff like that because I was a kid myself. Fortunately, I can say I know how she turned out, and it's a happy ending. We went to the same college, and she was originally signed up for pre-med because even though this gal was a computer whiz, her mom insisted she had to be a doctor. Within a year, though, she rebelled against everything and became a computer science major, the horror, and became a known source of advice for other kids of Asian descent in particular, seeking to stand up to their parents' expectations. She's now a test engineer working for a household name computing company and posts pictures of international travel and various geeky hobbies. So, I guess she was great once she could find herself, and most of the weirdness was imposed upon her. People are asking how I was weird. Unfortunately, while astronomy is a cool thing to be into as an adult, it is not when you are at an all-girls high school. This was combined with how honestly I didn't know how to interact with a lot of the other kids. I wasn't shy, but had real trouble making friends. Was very ostracized in elementary school too, like kid who sat alone at lunch for years, and didn't figure it out until college. I've told this before, but my dad told me about a kid he went to high school with who used to sit in the back of the class mumbling and giggling to himself all the time. Occasionally, he'd pick his nose and eat the results. Despite this, my dad said, he was apparently really smart and got all A's. He told me the guy's name, and since it was pretty distinctive, I looked him up online. He was a federal appeals court judge. Wow, my dad has a similar high school story. I promise that my recollection of this is true, but my father may have embellished some bits, though I don't see why he would. Back when my father was in high school, he had several classes with the weird kid/outcast. Always kept to himself and had trouble making friends because he wasn't engaging in conversations like most people are. Not that he wouldn't socialize, but rather, he only socialized when necessary, and to him, it was a means to an end. For context, the story was told like a decade ago. And that kid was Tom Cruise. I did verify, they indeed went to the same high school together, and were in the same year. So, take from that what you will. It's been 7 years and he still messages me on Facebook once a week. I haven't spoken to him or replied in 7 years and he sends me paragraphs of text. I see it as a dang game now. Freaking 7 years. What the heck, Mark? It's only a couple years out of high school at this point, but one of my good friends is high-functioning autistic, and thus was considered very weird in high school. He's found a job stocking the refrigerators at a local supermarket and is enjoying that from what he tells me. He's taking classes on and off at a local university, but doesn't know what he wants to go into. He's also getting into writing fanfiction and is continuing his passion for LEGO. On a side note, his creations in LEGO are super impressive, especially considering his limited resources. He discovered that he was better at interacting with computers than with people and became a software engineer. Ran into him at Costco, wrapping up a PhD at 25. Not bad at all. There was a girl at my school who I'll call Melanie. Melanie was easily the most socially awkward/unaware girl I've ever met. Like, pleasuring herself at school awkward, picking her nose and eating it publicly awkward. By the end of high school, she had figured out how not to do these insane things that made people stare and laugh at her, but needless to say, she had a rough go. But she was also one of those people who was a really nice, genuine person. I moved away after college and didn't have Facebook until at least 10 years after graduation, so I had no idea what most of my classmates were doing. Maybe 5 years ago, I spotted her and friended her. She ended up marrying this guy who went to our school and was maybe 3 years older than us. I knew him from work, and he asked me out at one point. He was also really, really nice, but super nerdy and socially awkward. I didn't think about it at the time, but when I saw she married him, I was like, oh my god, they're perfect for each other. They moved to a state that has a bunch of mountains and they don't have any children, so they're always posting all these amazing hiking and rock climbing adventures they're doing together. They go to all kinds of festivals together. Renaissance, I think, Star Trek, horror, etc. They look super happy, and I talked to her grandma last year, who told me they're as happy as clams. I'm just so happy for her. The type of weird that you wanted to have as a friend rather than not. I have a few too many stories with this kid in middle/high school. He was a kleptomaniac, had illegal, exotic, and dangerous pets, obsession with knives and weapons, had no regard for normal social standards and cues. Despite him being an innately skilled entrepreneur, he was a general menace to society. I went off to college and later learned his home was raided by ATF. His father had been manufacturing automatic weapons for the Latin kings, and they charged him on an unregistered gun and pot/shroom chocolates found in his room. Last I heard of him after he got out of prison was on a flyer for a community board advertising basic around the house labor, with his head superimposed on a cartoon Superman. I met him at a bus stop, and I only managed to say, "Hey, how are you? What are you doing nowadays?" He responded, "I'm a cat, meow, meow," and ran away across the road, where he almost got hit by a car in the process. I didn't see him come back to take a bus. I suppose he turned into a furry or something? He is so much happier than he was in high school, where people would physically assault him, harass him, and mock him. He has autism and is obsessed with Batman and sharks. The last time I saw him was 2 years ago when I was walking around my friend's college, and he was delighted to see me, and even remembered my name where we caught up. And he told me all about how he had been on vacation and got to go out on a boat and see sharks. I mean, Batman and sharks are both pretty freaking rad. Still weird. Not as weird as in high school when he invited me over to have frozen pizzas and watch Animal Planet, the original Netflix and chill. He asked every single day in science class, without fail. Then he wiped his bugs on the front of my desk. We had a kid who thought he was a ninja. He even wore the shoes with the split toes. Ended up getting busted talking 12-year-old girls online into favors at a local park. While awaiting trial, was busted by internet vigilantes posing as underage girls going after multiple faked accounts. His trial was on the news quite a bit. About 10 years later, there was an expose on conditions at a prison, and he was interviewed working out in the yard. Few years after his release, a news crew knocked on his door for one of those kitty diddlers in your neighborhood do you know where they are segments. One of the kids from back in school has a very nice compilation of all these segments. At a 10-year-old high school reunion, met up with two guys. One who was captain of the football team, always had the hot chicks, you know the type. The other who had been a painfully shy and awkward nerd that was shunned and made fun of. Overheard the conversation with the nerd, instigated it with Mr. Football, which went something like this. "Hey, what have you been doing with yourself?" Mr. Football said he was in the Navy, I forget the rank, and was a cook at the Brig, aka Navy Jail. Nerd replied, "Hey, I joined the Navy too." He went on to very humbly say he was a lieutenant commander, fighter pilot, and was working on his PhD in some sort of engineering field. He walked off. True revenge of the nerd. I thought this was going to end in one of those and everybody clapped stories, but I'm glad this was more believable. Just saw a guy who ran with the weird crowd at my school. They were the anime manga type crowd, but I always respected them for doing what they enjoyed. He approached me at the local gym. A very polite, respectful guy always, and I found out that he was working and playing in 2 bands. I'm glad he came up to me, and I'm extremely glad he's doing what he loves to do. Let people do what they do, as they'll probably let you do what you love to as well. He's still my friend, still weird, just a bit more mature. I think he'll be single forever though. He gets girls, but never long term. He's just too unique. It will have to be a very certain person. Those words are doing a lot of heavy lifting there. I'm not sure you trust that kid at all. Weird, but always mad and very strong. My dad sent me a newspaper clipping some years ago. He was around 40 and at a country and western nightclub when 3 men in their 20s jumped him in the parking lot. He then went inside and told the bar owner that he'd been jumped in his parking lot. He then told him to call the police and to make sure an ambulance was called because they were hurt badly. "Call an ambulance, but not for me." I dated the weird kid in middle school, but he moved away and we lost contact. We reconnected when I was in college. He dropped out of high school and was kind of lost in life. He'd gotten 2 girls pregnant and was working 3 jobs to pay child support. He flirted heavily with me when we talked, and I decided it wasn't worth the baggage and politely stepped out of his life. Last I heard, he became a skinhead and joined an alt-right faction in Oklahoma. This is a certified 0 to 100 moment. I was a weird kid. The way I would put it is, if I were born 10 to 15 years later, I probably would have been diagnosed as being on the autism spectrum. I was smart, emotionally precocious, but I had a lot of strange coordination and motor control issues. For me, playing looked like collecting or sorting piles of things from the backyard or lining up my toys in height order. Never had many friends, dressed like a dork, had trouble fitting in. I was awkward, teased, and bullied into late middle school. I grew out of it somehow. I don't really remember there being any process. I like to think that I grew into myself. I got good social skills. I'm relatively attractive, and people like me. Still have some weird idiosyncrasies, but I'm cool enough to own them nowadays. My childhood and adolescence still influence a lot of my fears, but overall, I'm glad to be who I am now, and growing up was important for that to happen. Let me introduce you to Josh. Josh was a strange boy in both looks and demeanor. Clearly he was from a poor background, which stood out in school because the overall demographic of the school was middle to upper middle class. So Josh shows up on the first day, slightly grubby looking, barely able to write his own name at 11 years old and looking like he wanted to punch a wall. He quickly made a name for himself, acting up in class, being tardy, and generally being a bit of a nuisance. He'd disrupt lessons, he'd lash out at other students, and he had a clear anger problem. Josh became an easy target for bullies because he would react to their bullying, usually by throwing a chair. It's fair to say, Josh had little to no friends. We were a tutor group of about 27 to 30, depending on people coming and going. Not a particularly tight-knit, but we had bonded over a couple things. A girl who'd had a brush with death was our tutor. One of our tutors left partway through the year. By year 9, we, for the most part, began to tolerate Josh. Josh, as a result, became more trusting and calmed down. He still had a heck of a temper and he was still an easy target, but he began to try and socialize a bit more. One day, it was a rainy lunchtime, and he came and sat with a group of us, all from the same tutor group. We asked him how he was, and he disclosed to us that his mom's new boyfriend had been showing him homosexual adult images. We, of course, being 13 to 14, didn't really know what to say or how to react, but there was a resounding consensus that that was not normal. He'd hinted at a very, very unhappy home life before. In hindsight, I don't know why any of the teachers didn't pick up on it when things he had mentioned were such a safeguarding risk. The more and more Josh disclosed, more of how miserable his home life was, how abused he was, the more respect we had for him. He didn't know anything other than violence. He had never been shown love or respect. He had never been given the opportunity to better himself. Over time, we became very, very protective of Josh. The cool boys in our tutor group would step into fights to defend him. We'd all keep an eye out for him when he was walking home, etc. I saw Josh about a year ago. I caught a glimpse of him in the street and shouted his name. He came running over and gave me the biggest bear hug ever. He told me he'd been working really hard on himself and that he was hoping to get a job in the local comic book shop where he spends hours and hours reading. He seemed genuinely happy and like he'd escaped his abusive background. Honestly, I wish him the absolute best, and I hope he finds both happiness and stability. Last time I saw him, he was running across campus, although he wasn't late for class. He did this in high school all the time. I caught his attention and we walked and chatted. He was my friend in high school. He's doing great. Weird is good. Weird hugging girl. Just saw her about a month ago. She's a teacher now and living the American dream. I can tell her favorite teacher was also mine. She operates just like him. She's on a successful path. Homeboy, whose parents adopted him for the tax break, is happily married with children. He found love and despite everything going against him, is successful. High school students of Reddit, just because they're that kid does not mean they are not human. Be humble. We've all been that kid. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, linked at the top of the description. And if you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot, linked in the description too. Either way, thanks a lot for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.